Tutaj już
Today
w blokach
I will
startowych. Będziemy rozmawiać o zrównoważonym rolnictwie, będziemy rozmawiać o kierunkach, które się tutaj kształtują, jeśli chodzi o perspektywę kilku kolejnych lat. I chciałabym tutaj zaprosić do mnie pana Adama Bauczę, prezesa Fundacji Rozwoju Rolnictwa Terra
is the head of Terra Nostra,
pana Eryka Frączaka, Head of Carbon Farming Heavy Finance, panią Annę Nalczenko z Fundacji Grunt Odnowa oraz panią Annę Gałązkę, kierownik Zakładu Mikrobiologii Rolniczej Instytutu Uprawy, Nawożenia i Gleboznawstwa BIP w Puławach.
Puławy, to be exact, a National Research Institute specializing in soil studies and fertilization. And to be even more exact, agricultural biology. Yesterday we talked a lot
którą mamy
about
dzisiaj, ale właściwie od jakiegoś
this
czasu
ongoing
związaną z
situation, the situation that we've had for some time now. It is linked to the Green Deal.
Ta dyskusja na temat kierunków rozwoju rolnictwa zrównoważonego
może sustainable farming,
też
how
pozwolić
it
pokazać,
can develop.
dlaczego
When we
jest to dobry
discuss
kierunek
it, we can show why this
z jakimi
is
też
the
wyzwaniami się możemy
direction
mierzyć
to
w
choose, but
przyszłych
also
latach.
which challenges
Czym jest tak
we
naprawdę
might
to
expect in the
rolnictwo
next few
zrównoważone?
years.
Bo
So,
myślę,
sustainable
że dużo
farming,
tutaj
what
się
is
mówi o
it
tym
really?
aspekcie środowiskowym, ale też
The
pamiętajmy, że
environmental
mamy
aspect
tutaj trzy
is
cele. Cel środowiskowy, ekonomiczny, czyli
stressed,
tą
but we
opłacalność
have this environmental factor, it's true. We have the economic factor, that is the profitability, but also it needs to be socially acceptable.
To rolnictwo to jest na pewno dobry
So we need
wśród
to
różnych społeczności.
discuss
To jest
whether
właśnie
this is
też
the
ten
right
aspekt,
direction. We
który
need to have
musimy
these discussions
spełnić.
in various milieux,
Z
in
czym to się
various
tak naprawdę wiąże?
communities.
No, odziedziczyliśmy
What is it linked to? We
od
need to
XX
remember
wieku taki model
that
rolnictwa konwencjonalnego,
we
który
have
był przede wszystkim nastawiony
inherited
na
this
zysk, ale to
conventional
wynikało z tego,
farming
że musimy
model that
wyżywić,
prevailed in the 20th century.
rosnącą
It is
populację.
profit-oriented,
No, ale w
and
międzyczasie
it stemmed from the
ten
fact that we had to
kierunek
feed a
spowodował
growing
między innymi
population.
degradację gleby i
It degraded
powoduje również
our
zmiany
soils, this
klimatyczne.
style of farming, but
Rolnictwo, można
also
powiedzieć, że z jednej
was
strony,
conducive to climate
przyczynia
change.
się
In other
oczywiście
words,
do
on the
tych
one
zmian, ale
hand,
też jest przede wszystkim
farming is
ofiarą
conducive to
tych
climate
zmian
change, but at the
i
same
z
time,
jakichś
it is
powodów
the
też musimy
victim of said
w takie
climate
procesy wejść,
change.
aby adaptować się do tych zmian
thus
i
we
umieć
need
to
to
wykorzystać w dobry
adapt to
sposób.
this change
I
and
przejście na tą
to
zrównoważoną
use the
produkcję
situation to our
rolniczą powinno
benefit.
być
So
też odpowiednio
the shift
kompensowane.
to
Dlatego
sustainable
dzisiaj porozmawiamy nie
farming
tylko
needs to be
o
properly
modelach, jakie
compensated.
rolnictwo
Today we
zrównoważone
will talk about the
oferuje, ale
models
również o
that
tym,
this
czy jest to
sustainable
opłacalne, jakie modele
farming
biznesowe można tworzyć
offers, but
w
also
tym
we will
kierunku.
talk about
Jakie
business
są
models
jeszcze
that are related
możliwości.
to it. In other words, what
Tak
other
więc
options are
chciałabym
there
zacząć może
out
od
there?
pani Anny.
Anna,
I
let us begin with you. A
tak
question.
naprawdę, czym są praktyki regeneratywne? Co oznacza regeneracja
Regeneration
gleby?
practices, what are they? What does it mean that we regenerate soil?
Z jednej strony
What are the
pomaga
limitations?
zapobiegać zmianom klimatu, ale
We
też
can
jakby
use
obniża
these
wrażliwość
practices to
samych
prevent
gospodarstw
or
na
to
skutki
mitigate
zmian,
climate
więc
change,
pani
but
Pani
also it
przybliżyła
makes us
tutaj.
less sensitive to said climate change. Anna,
Przede
would you
wszystkim,
please tell us more?
skupiłabym się na tym,
Hello,
żeby,
thank you.
jasno wyrazić, że tutaj chodzi o
First,
zachowanie opłacalności.
let me highlight the fact
Jakby
that
bardzo rzadko
it is
wydaje mi się,
about
albo niewystarczająco
keeping
często w
profitability.
przypadku praktyki regeneratywnej czy
When it
praktyki
comes to
zrównoważonego rolnictwa
sustainable
rozpoczynamy
farming
od
and
tematu
regenerative
opłacalności,
practices,
a praktyka ta
all
tak de
too
facto
often
jest
we
między innymi skupiona
begin
na
at the wrong place.
poważnym ograniczeniu
We
kosztów.
Want to
I
limit
poszczególne praktyki de facto
costs.
wpływają
Certain
już w pierwszych
practices
latach
early
w
on, in
gospodarstwie
the first few
na to,
years,
że jesteśmy w stanie
in a farm,
równoważyć
we can introduce a certain balance things out, because there are certain factors that can
jesteśmy w tym momencie w takim stanie, w którym
disturb our
na większości terytorium
productivity.
one są poważnie zakwaszone,
Our
mają
soils
bardzo
are
niską
too
zawartość
acidic,
próchnicy.
At this point,
Na to wskazują
there is
wszelkie
too
badania
little
prowadzone od wielu lat. I ta
humus.
praktyka w dalszym ciągu
This is what we have
na większości
observed.
terytorium, która jest stosowana, jakby nie wpływa na poprawę tego stanu rzeczy. A
So,
to warunkuje nam opłacalność produkcji. Praktyka
we need to remember that we need to be profitable. Regenerative practices are important in this regard.
Gleby naruszać w sposób taki, powiedziałabym, barbarzyński.
We do not want to be barbaric in our soil treatment. We need to preserve the cover throughout the year. This is the perfect approach. Yes, you have this traditional style of fertilization, chemical compounds based, and we can learn about it more in other panels. But the thing is, there are a number of websites that discuss that. Still remember, all farms are different. What we do, we work with farmers, we are close to the soil, we try to find an economic business model that will make it possible for a farmer to change their ways and remain profitable. Oftentimes, it means a completely different approach to the farm. It is about diversification, also about diversifying one's production. And an example here, 10 hectares, 1,000 hectares, you may generate the same profit out of those two completely different in size farms. So quite often we start in the wrong place, and often people begin with things that are quite controversial and difficult. We have a Facebook website, it's a whole service, and I read comments there, and people misread what the practices are all about. They misunderstand them. There is a document that covers how shall I say it, about taking this more biological-oriented approach. And there is a way that can change things. 70 to 20% bigger yield only because you have changed pH properly. Because then, if the pH is right, plants can use whatever is in the soil better. So what I mean is liming. It is very important. Also, there is too little education activities. And as we sit here, this is exactly what we do. We work with farmers on an everyday basis. We have introduced certain polls at our Facebook website. Tens of thousands of people follow us. And there are three things that are very important for farmers today. Because basically, remember that we are talking about to be or not to be of a given farm. And remember, a farm is about real people, about a family that needs to stay afloat. So what you know, what you need is an advisor that has been through it all, that has experienced all possible scenarios. So they need to have actual real-life experience. Also, another important thing is you need to have the so-called lighthouse or a role model sort of farm that could be tapped into for knowledge, for experience. When there are issues, you need to be able to call a friend, a colleague, and solve a problem on the spot rather in a month's time. And the third important criterion is money. Remember about it. In some countries, you have competitions where the focal point is how beautifully the field looks like rather than how efficient it is. Ania Gałązka, question to you. Regenerative farming, these regenerative farming practices, what do they give us? I mean, in the context of soil health, biodiversity, and how better to use nutrients. Carbon farming is another name for this notion. It is something that allows you to capture carbon and keep it in the soil.
profesjonalnie od strony badań opowiedziała.
But I understand that you could tell us more about the academic and scientific aspect of things. I represent an research institute that focuses on soil. We have been providing advice, consulting. Now, Anna has raised a number of issues, and they are very close to what we do.
Każdy, kto uprawia glebę i uprawia rośliny, musi mieć
Farmers
z tego zysk i musi być to
need
opłacalne
to be profitable.
Ale coraz
What they do
więcej, coraz
needs to be
szerzej mówi
profitable.
się o tej jakości
More and
środowiska
more,
glebowego.
you
I to
hear
z
how
perspektywy
important the
naukowców jest
quality
bardzo ważne,
of the
że w
soil
końcu ten
is.
aspekt
It's a
tej
whole
jakości gleby,
chunk of environment.
aktywności mikrobiologicznej
So
gleby,
the
oceny
soil
bioróżnorodności
needs to
tego
be
środowiska
biologically,
został w pewnym
microbiologically
sensie
active. It needs to be
uwypuklony i
diverse.
wyszczegółowiony.
And this
Jest
aspect
wiele
has
takich
been
praktyk, o których już tutaj
more
koleżanka
pronounced.
wspomniała, które
My colleague has
mają
mentioned a
na
number of
celu
practices.
właśnie zwiększenie aktywności
Those practices are
enzymatycznej gleby,
aimed
zwiększenie
at
liczebności
making
mikroorganizmów
enzymes more
w
active
glebie.
in the
Na
soil,
wczorajszych panelach
about
też bardzo
boosting
dużo
the microbial
mówiono
activity in the
o
soil.
aktywności
Yesterday,
mikroorganizmów, o
actually,
preparatach,
that
które
was discussed at
są
length.
budowane właśnie
Various
z komponentem mikrobiologicznym, bo jak Państwo doskonale
products
wiedzą,
have
gleba
this
jest
microbiological
żywym organem,
component.
który jest bardzo
Soil
szeroko
is a living organ, you
zasiedlony
might
przez
say.
wszelkiego rodzaju
What you have in the soil are a number of different organisms.
Tych wszystkich organizmów
There is this rich fauna
jest
there.
niezmiernie
They are
ważna w
active
kontekście
and they
jakości,
are
żyzności i zdrowia tej gleby.
important,
I
and their
praktyk,
activity is
jeśli chodzi o
important
rolnictwo
in the context of
zrównoważone,
soil
o
health.
rolnictwo węglowe,
So we
które
are talking
jest
about
jakby
carbon farming,
tym samym
sustainable
w
farming.
kontekście zrównoważenia tej
Basically,
produkcji.
it
To
is
jest
one the
dbałość
same
o glebę.
thing.
Rolnik
And
musi
what
wiedzieć, na jakiej glebie
the
pracuje,
common
jaki
denominator
jest
here
jej
is
odczyn, jakie
is
są,
the health of the
zasoby
soil.
tejże gleby,
A
jeśli
farmer
chodzi o
needs to
składniki
know its
pokarmowe,
pH,
tak, aby
its
móc w odpowiedni
makeup.
sposób
They need to
zbilansować te
know all
braki.
that so as
To jest
to
również aspekt bardzo racjonalnego
add to the soil whatever is
używania
missing.
zarówno nawożenia organicznego,
You
jak i
need to use
nawożenia
organic
mineralnego.
fertilization and
Racjonalnego to
mineral
znaczy w odpowiednich
fertilization.
dawkach,
You need
w
to be
odpowiednich
rational about it.
terminach,
That
pod
is,
odpowiednią
you need to have
roślinę,
proper
w zależności od
dosage.
tego,
You
na
need
jakich
to
glebach
make it
gospodarujemy
appropriate
i z jaką
for a
rośliną
given
mamy
plan, the right
do czynienia.
season,
To jest właśnie
and so on and so
aspekt
forth.
wapnowania, czyli
Liming is
odpowiedniego
also
utrzymania
important.
odczynu gleby.
So you
Wiadomo,
need to
że
keep
aktywność
the right
mikrobiologiczna
pH
jest
level.
najbardziej,
The microbiological
aktywna i
activity
racjonalna
is
przy
very
odczynie neutralnym,
important,
więc na glebach
especially when you have
kwaśnych
neutral
to
pH.
jest
When you have
bardzo ważne.
acidic
Również na glebach
soils,
alkalicznych
liming is
należy
incredibly
odpowiednio ten,
important. The same is true about
poziom odczynu
alkalic
obniżyć, tak żeby dojść do
salts. You
tego
have to
poziomu
lower your
neutralnego.
pH so
To
that
są
you
wszelkiego
reach the
rodzaju
neutral
również techniki
pH.
związane z międzyplonami,
Also,
wsiewkami.
you have a number of different
Podejście do
practices.
takiego rolnictwa konserwującego, czyli dbającego o zawartość materii organicznej, zwiększającego
You
tą
need
materię
to
organiczną
want to
gleby, która, jak
preserve
wspominała, to
the
ciągle
organic
jest niedostatek,
matter
jeśli chodzi o
in the
zawartość
soil.
tropnicy w glebie. To są
Because
procesy
the
długotrwałe,
humus
ale właśnie
is
procesy,
often
które
insufficient
bazują
in
na
quantity.
aktywności mikrobiologicznej.
But
To
all that
właśnie
relies
mikroorganizmy
on
prowadzą
biological
te bardzo
activity.
ważne
It
procesy
is
w glebie
these
do
organisms
powstania
that are responsible
materii
for
organicznej i
important
próchnicy.
processes that lead
To
to
są
the
również
creation of
różnego
humus.
rodzaju praktyki
Also,
związane
what
z
you need to
wprowadzaniem
remember about
zamienników
is to
nawozów
find certain
mineralnych. To są
replacements
bioprodukty,
for
biopretaraty.
mineral fertilizers.
Nasz
You've got
instytut od
bioproducts of
grudnia
various sorts.
2022
Since
roku prowadzi
2022,
ocenę i listę
we
nawozowych
have
produktów
been looking
mikrobiologicznych.
at
To są produkty,
microbiological
które zawierają w swoim
fertilizers.
komponencie
What are they?
mikroorganizmy.
You've got
Mikroorganizmy mają cały szereg
microorganisms
różnych
as a
funkcji.
part of the makeup of such a
Potrafią
fertilizer.
wiązać
They can do a
azot
number of
zarówno w
things.
formie
They can
symbiotycznej,
bind
azot wolny
nitrogen,
związany przez wolno
various
żyjące
forms of
mikroorganizmy.
nitrogen.
To w jakiś sposób również rekompensuje
Also,
zużycie
another thing,
nawożenia mineralnego, jeśli chodzi o azot.
mineral
Bo jest to dostarczane właśnie
fertilization
przez
needs to be
mikroorganizmy
compensated for
Mikroorganizmy
because
również
microorganisms can
potrafią,
actually
udostępnić
step in and
fosfor,
do
który
it.
związany jest
Phosphorus
dostępny dla roślin.
is
Więc
something
tutaj też
that
ten aspekt
microorganisms
nawożenia
can
fosforem
help
może
you
być w pewnym
with. So
stopniu
phosphorus
zrekompensowany przez
fertilization can
tego typu
also
preparaty.
be to some extent
To też
compensated
taka
for or
ważna rzecz,
replaced
jeśli chodzi
by
o
that
rolnictwo
type of
zrównoważone,
biological
wciąż aktualne i znane, jeśli
approach.
chodzi o praktykę rolniczą zmianowanie.
So then we have introduction of the right sequence of plants and then increasing the share of certain plants then to provide the right volume of nitrogen, and the plants can draw nitrogen from that. So there are so many different methods used in farming, and we've been evaluating these concepts, and we introduce certain methodologies and assess them in order to recommend them for practical application in farming. As I mentioned, there are quite many practical applications, but it's all for soil to be fertile and resourceful and rich in the necessary nutrients that can be then made available to plants.
Pojawia się już po raz kolejny. Ponad 64% w Polsce gleb jest zagrożonych.
Acidification of soil, where this is an important issue here. More than 64% of soil in Poland is heavily are heavily acidified. So at the European level, it's important to emphasize the fact that we have the soil strategy, and then we have the strategy for biodiversity. These strategies mention regenerative practices, and that is based on the sustainable goals. And one of these goals is live on the land.
Jest to i globalnie kierunek rozwoju i jest to też wysoko na agendzie Unii, ale tak schodząc już tutaj do nas, do Polski, chciałam pana Adama
preventing the certification is one of the factors that is important here. So my question to Adam is, what are the key trends in developing that model of farming? Do you think that farmers and business could benefit from this direction, or is it the only direction?
Zrównoważone rolnictwo, węglowe
rolnictwo, the buzzword regenerative farming, sustainable farming, they have been mentioned quite a bit here. Let us look at farming at large. We have farmers in this room, and I would say that 100% of them, they are all regenerative farmers. So the activities, well, what they do on their fields, well, it is sustainable, regenerative. Everyone would like to have fertile soil and soil that produces high volumes of yield. With that, we need to help introduce a certain structure, system, so that things can be even more improved, that could lead to higher efficiencies. The goal is to have higher yield from crops. The more fertile, the more nourished soil is, then us consumers will benefit from it. So we have just one concept of agriculture. And agriculture should feed us all with the lowest, smallest, tiniest adverse impact on the environment. Agriculture should be aware of why, how, and if. So we spoke yesterday about the education, which is lacking from the start. We live in a bubble. We basically believe in certain truths, like application of certain types of fertilizers. Well, I think we're past the stage. We should have this right approach to fertilization. We should bear in mind that these microorganisms, that life, well, all that is there to help. So a farmer should avoid preventing these microorganisms from working, and the industry should benefit from that. Well, unfortunately, there are some bottom-up initiatives which remain unseen, which remain invisible. We should make everyone aware of how important a farmer is in this chain of production. 80% of the produce supplied by farmers to the mill or to food processing plants, these are goods directly supplied by farmers. So the farmer is the key element here. To speak in the context of emissions, and we should bear in mind that emissions and everything that is happening around agriculture, all that should lead to certain conclusions, to certain manifestations. Well, we have certain natural phenomena, and all that will contribute to alleviating that negative adverse impact on the environment. The industry may, can, and should benefit from that and take advantage of these solutions. So we have emissions, and we have that impact on the environment, the impact on the biodiversity, the impact on the consumption of water and other resources. Well, these are key factors. Now the question is about how to engage farmers. And the question is, how can industry join that concept and that movement? Well, the industry has this one important set of tools, which is indispensable, and that is money. So it's about the industry, it's about food processing plants. We need this awareness of how important farmers and food production is. Right. So you mentioned emissions. Quite many aspects of that have been mentioned. So we spoke about regenerative practices, and in the strategic plan, we have that carbon farming concept. These are typically regenerative practices. These are not carbon credits. Sometimes we hear some information on that which is not, which does not present the right picture of the things. And there are some solutions on the market. These solutions come from Canada and from the USA. There are certain standards that apply. Companies may sell carbon credits, and farmers may also benefit from that and trade that. Well, we have sustainable carbon cycles, and we are very much looking forward to that and such carbon certificates. So my question goes to Eric now. We have these direct applications of carbon reduction. So it's about reducing emissions in farms, also through binding carbon in soil at a larger scale. My question is about the benefit of that model for farmers. Well, I believe that carbon farming is the answer that Adam was looking for. So these are tools supporting farmers financially. And these tools may have a positive impact on the natural environment. Let us think about Poland. We have about 10 million hectares with the sequestration potential of about 20 million tons. And then depending on the type of soil, there are different carbon binding potentials. But actually, we're talking about a huge area which could be turned into low emission areas owing to Polish farmers, because there are some technologies that can bind that oxygen in soil and carbon in soil. Well, first, let us not forget that a farmer is a small or medium-sized entrepreneur. And farmers are quite susceptible to market turmoils. Nowadays, markets are very volatile. Farmers must look for sources of income, for sales opportunities, and there are some elements of risk. So all farmers do, well, that must be connected with direct financial benefits for financial income. So in brief, farming engages practices which are directly oriented towards binding that carbon in soil, and issue of carbon certificates, well, that would be a direct award or reward to farmers for removing these emissions. So that would go to every farmer with carbon binding potential. We spoke about it yesterday. We spoke about farms, we spoke about agricultural enterprises, with farmers assisting in measuring carbon footprint. We need to keep on collecting data. We need to be aware that there could be potential greenwashing involved, so we must proceed with caution. So we should be looking for solutions in the value of, in the chain of values at farmers. So my question goes to Anna Gałązka. How about yield from crops grown on such soil? My question is about economics of running a farm. So is that profitable at all? Well, I think it's simple and straightforward. We have certain type of resource which is shrinking, and over the past 10 years we lost about 30% of soil globally in terms of yield, and in Poland we have been also seeing desertification of soil, and with that we have a major growth of the population that we need to feed. Now, when we look at the global trends, we can see that over the next 10 years, we'll have to welcome more people on the same territory. So limited resources and growing needs, well, all that translates into a higher yield and higher profit from each fertile hectare.
Katastroficznej rozpościerać, bo jesteśmy tutaj w sumie też po to, żeby pokazać, że ta zmiana jest możliwa, procesy pewne, co widzimy w wielu
sketching
gospodarstwach,
such
nawet po 2-3 latach zastosowania
dark
praktyki,
and gloomy
zresztą
scenarios,
tygodniowo
even
wraz z
after
grupą
3
agronomów,
years
których szkolimy w tej
of
chwili,
practices. Last week
wraz
with a group
z
of
świetną ekipą
10 students of farming with a great international team, we were working in the fields that have been subject to
mamy 2 pola po 2 stronach ulicy, na jednej mamy pływalnię, taki basen odkryty, po drugiej stronie mamy
we have been measuring outcrops and comparing the type of crop such as such as rape, such as clover, and I'm not talking here about farmers who operate on small acreage. I'm talking about large farms and farmers who've been working hard in the past 10 years on improving the yield from crops. So we struggle to restore the condition of homeostasis of the soil. We have learned only a small part about a small part of all processes which are ongoing, and hopefully with the support of the artificial intelligence we can continue with these processes and studies. Hopefully with our support, with the scientific support that comes from discoveries and inventions, we can proceed. What I'm often amazed at when looking at foreign practices, and this is what I would expect in Poland too, is to start from an Excel sheet. It is to start from budgeting, balancing costs and income, and looking at perspective. I don't think we have sufficient climate-related education. The most recent climate map, which is now being in production, is measuring the relationship between precipitation and
bardzo mocno skompartowane, z bardzo słabą strukturą i nikłą próchnicą, po prostu nie infiltrują
such as pairing.
I ta relacja opadu i parowania w latach od 80 do 2020
vaporization
zwłaszcza w ostatnim dziesięcioleciu w proporcji mniej więcej pół na pół normalnych
precipitation relationship changed to 13% when it comes to precipitation, and then apparently we are losing very important type of resource here. You touched upon a very important topic, so we should start from scratch, and that scratch is an Excel sheet in order to calculate emissions, to provide some evidence, some tangible evidence to industry. We need some data, some tangible data that we don't have. In farming, we do not have the basic data to be able to calculate the emissions. In general, we use some ad hoc notes and we fill out our crop sheet once per year, but that is insufficient data to speak about carbon sequestration, about reduction of consumption, to speak about sustainable carbon farming. We need to have a reference point. To speak about carbon binding in soil,
żeby
I
wiedzieć,
need
ile
to
ja tego
have
węgla na dzisiaj mam w
quite
polu. Na
detailed
każdym polu.
calculations
Co ile my badamy
of
glebę
the
w Polsce?
volume of carbon in
Rolnicy.
field. How
Co ile?
often do you analyze
Co
and test your
co 4
soil
lata.
for
Za
carbon?
mało. Co mi
Every
daje to badanie
3,
co
every
4 lata?
4 years.
Ja mam
Well,
podejmować
this frequency
decyzje,
is
świadome decyzje o
insufficient.
nawożeniu, bazując
I
na
need
wynikach
to
z
have
4 lat, jeszcze na bardzo okrojonych wynikach,
more
które
updated
dostaję z
results.
laboratorium, ze stacji.
How can I
mam
make a
kilka
decision
parametrów
on the
zbadanych. Ja na
basis
podstawie tych
of
parametrów jeszcze sprzed iluś lat mam
results
podjąć
that go
decyzje,
back
niekiedy milionowe
3
decyzje
or
o
4
zakupie środków,
years?
nie tylko nawozów, wszystkich środków
Farmers
ochrony
make
roślin.
decisions
Bo to,
about
co ja robię, tak naprawdę, to ja muszę świadomie
procurement
podjąć na
of
bieżąco
plant
decyzje
protecting
i muszę nad tym panować. A dwa,
chemicals,
muszę mieć też
about
wiedzę,
pesticides,
jak ja
etc.
wpłynąłem
We
w
need
danym sezonie
knowledge
wegetacyjnym, czyli
about
wszystkimi
our
swoimi praktykami,
impact
nie tylko
on
nawożeniem
the
mineralnym czy nawożeniem
vegetational
organicznym.
season,
Każdą
with
czynnością,
all
którą ja
our
na danym polu
practices, with
robiłem,
all our
co ja
activity
spowodowałem.
in every
Czy ja
field.
poprawiłem? Bo
I
może
need
jest
to
tak, że ja
know
poprawiłem
what I've
materię
done.
organiczną.
Have I improved the
I się cieszę.
situation?
Nie zaszkodziłem tej glebie, nie zaszkodziłem
Maybe
temu polu.
I've
Może w
improved
przyszłości ja
the health of the
spróbuję,
soil.
ja poprawiłem parametry gleby,
Maybe
zbilansowałem ją
I
odpowiednio
have
lepiej.
improved the soil
Jest bardziej
parameter, it's
wydajna.
better
Ja mogę się
balanced,
zastanowić, to może ja teraz
it's
ograniczę
more
to
effective,
nawożenie.
so maybe
Że
now
muszę
I
mieć
could
dane na bieżąco,
limit my
wprowadzamy
fertilization,
pełną
but to
ewidencję
do
tego,
that I
co
need to
ja
take
robię,
stock.
bo ten
I
przemysł
need to
nie
do
da
it more
pieniędzy
often.
na ładne
Industry
oczy.
will not give you the
On musi
money
mieć
because
My
you
musimy
smile
dostarczyć
nice.
dowód,
No,
jeżeli
you
będziemy
need
mówić o redukcji
evidence.
jakiejkolwiek emisyjności na naszym towarze,
So,
czy to na pszenicy, na rzepaku,
We are
na
talking
burakach
about
cukrowych, ziemniakach,
reducing
innych towarach, które
emissions
produkuję,
when
to ja muszę
you
mieć
grow
dowód, że
your
rzeczywiście ta emisyjność w
crops,
danym
be
roku
it
wygląda
wheats
tak.
or something
Nie
else,
będziemy
but
też
you
mogli
need to be
określać
able
emisyjności,
to
bazując
prove
na jakichś
the level of your
wskaźnikach, które są, że tak
emissions.
powiem, przez różne uczelnie czy instytuty obliczone. Bo to nie będzie
You
moja emisja.
cannot
jeśli ja
rely
będę
on
bazował na
something that has
wskaźnikach.
been
To
calculated
będzie
at one
emisja, którą
university
ktoś
of
wyliczył,
another,
policzył gdzieś tam i
because
tyle. A to nie będzie realna
it is
emisja w innym
somebody
gospodarstwie.
else's emissions, somebody else's calculations. You need to make these calculations by yourself. Maybe a single database for farmers could help. That or a tool. It needs to be simple enough to help any farmer so that they can present evidence. You can prove by showing samples, soil samples that you have taken annually. It is not that costly. Soil sampling is an investment, not a cost. You may spend, what, 100 to 100 zlotys for taking a sample, but then you will save 10% in fertilizer. It is even incomparable. It does pay off. To change anything, you need to take an informed decision. It's not about what you feel. You need evidence. You need Excel sheets. You need to take notes that you can look at. Emissions can be estimated. Many farms already do that. And Ania has been showing that. They've been functioning in this way, year for years. But you can look at the numbers, look at hard data, and point to the moments when it actually worked. Was it after a year in a given farm, or 2 or 5 years? When did it actually benefit you so that you could spend less? To do that, you need evidence, you need data first. You need to learn that. Soon, we farmers will be expected to present this data. No food producer, no industry player will be able to assess the level of their emissions without us, our data. The data generated by farmers. And we would like to take this first step. We farmers need to be ready. We need to be ready because the industry will approach us quite soon. And then I will say, here I am, I'm ready, I've got the evidence, this is what I'm producing, I've got the data, I can actually provide you with evidence why the emissions are what they are. It shouldn't be just something that has been imposed by somebody else, by Brussels. No. we need to motivate ourselves because it's something that we need. To change anything at all, I need to consult my data from 3 years back and see what impact a given change has had. If it's worked, great. If it hasn't, maybe I can change something else. But I always need data. Profitable farming needs planning. Also, when it comes to some plants, you've got potatoes, for example. There you also have another factor that is storage. And I need to know in advance whether I should produce potatoes because this production is very costly. If I take this decision, it needs to be an informed decision. You know, it should not be an ad hoc decision because if I know that maize is in vogue, so everybody's producing maize. But if I follow suit, I know that I'm not going to make much money because it's going to be cheap. So we want to make farming more sustainable, regenerative. This is the first step on the road to get there. We've been hearing about it for some time, and farmers have been finding it difficult. There are certain solutions available in the market. There are even companies and experts that help to get there. So education is necessary. Anna, you have wanted to add something, but first you need to know what to test. Sometimes it is not that easy. We have some projects that we run together with the partners from the Netherlands. So some things are not that easy to carry out. So what we do, we take samples, we send them to the Netherlands, we get results from there.
Zaczęłabym od tego jednak, albo wróciłabym do tego, że ta edukacja jest tym poziomem 0, tak? Dlatego, że bez tego rolnik nawet jeśli ma bardzo dobrą wolę i jakby każdy chce zarabiać więcej i ziemi jakby utrzymać siebie i swoją rodzinę i zrobić to zyskownie.
Without education, it's going to be harder. Yes, because everybody wants to act. True, but you need support. You need people who are going to give you some advice. English is an obstacle because in Polish you don't have sufficient reliable sources. And Horizon Live, there are programs that have been generating information. The thing is,
czy to dotyczy ekoschematów, czy wszelkich innych propozycji, które
so we are somewhat ahead of time to some extent.
Przychodzi do rolnika taki Excel i tam jest napisane,
imagine that you've got an Excel given to a farmer, you can see benefits, and many people say, why? This amount is not going to cover what I need to do. It makes no sense. So the practice itself doesn't seem meaningful to many. The way I see it, there are certain measuring tools, but they are secondary. First, I need to know why and what I want to test. John Kemp has a nice podcast. He speaks about regenerative farming. He's been doing that for years. He's an icon because he also covers profitability. You can listen to that. And they focus on different parameters. You look at the plants because it's the plant that manages the whole thing, not the soil. So in terms of education, you can see that things are basically upside down. You know, it's putting the cart before the horse. There are these items, and we do things that are habitual but make no sense. Meteo stations, hardly anyone actually taps into that. And sometimes you can take two actions rather than 4, because certain activities are not necessary. Also, you can use a microbiological product that will protect plants from infections. Also, different infections and different pests appear. At this point, we cannot do it well. The vegetative season is extended by 8 years. You've got droughts too, and you've got floods, and that impacts profitability. So you have to be very precise in what you do. To begin with, you need to prepare yourself. You need to prepare simple tools. And there is some software that is generally available, but this type of software is simply too hard. You know, when you are in high school or later, you don't use this software. It's difficult to introduce it in your farming practice. Because it would be better to learn it when you are still getting your education, so that you can use it later in your practice. Yes, tools are important. Software is important. But people think that these are, you know, a few more boxes or fields that they have to fill in. But it is not supposed to be a burden. It's supposed to be helpful. It is about helping you to take proper informed decisions. When it comes to this business model, you get also an upside. You get access to your own data. Otherwise, you wouldn't be motivated to collect this info. I mean, crop rotation, summary, fertilization information. Happy Finance is a company I work for. We support farmers in getting official certificates, I mean, carbon generation. And industry requires such certification. They want things measured. And then a farmer can use all that to the best of their ability so that they benefit too. We've been working with certain farmers. They give data back. They know about, you know, the humus content, the level of precipitation. They are very much interested in this information, this data. This data helps them to be more informed and better to run their business. But every farm is different. A question. How do you compare these data? Should you have separate criteria for different farms? But how do you do that? We want comparability, we want competitiveness. I think that this is an issue. It is not a problem. You have certain data input standards. There are certain ISO standards that regulate it, that try to introduce some structure there. You need to take the right approach. Yes, every farm is different, but data should have a single form, because we use similar equipment, and we all use phosphorus-based fertilizers or nitrogen-based fertilizers. These are things that we have in common. It's already there. So we do not have to, you know, demolish everything and build things from scratch. No, we need to take the things and tools that are already available. We can choose one that is the most friendly to farmers, so that you can aggregate data in a single database. It shouldn't be generally available. Farmers complain, if I input the data, somebody else will use this data and make solutions. No, that's not the point. I want to be able to show off, to show that my products are more competitive, that they are better produced. This is the point. We are in a global market. We know what's happening in the market. There is a lot of mess, but we want to be competitive. We want to sell. We can never compete on cost with the players on the other side of our eastern border. No, we need to set ourselves apart, you know, to show that we provide quality, so that people do not
potrzebujemy
shop elsewhere.
zagregowanych danych.
But for
w
that,
jednej
we
formie,
need
które
aggregated
będą
data.
służyć
The
z jednej
form needs to
strony
be
rolnikowi,
consistent.
z
It
drugiej
needs to
strony
help the
przemysłowi
farmers
przetwórcy, który z tego
and
skorzysta, ale
the
skorzysta
processing
tylko z jakiegoś
industry
odsetka tych danych
and the
wszystkich, czyli
industry as
tego.
such.
Firmie czy instytucji, która
A
będzie
company
mogła
or
wygenerować i
institution
pomóc
also
w
will
sprzedaży
be
tego
able to
jeszcze, co
help
zostanie
because
u
they
rolnika,
can
tego
help you
kredytu
to
węglowego, czy tego
sell
węgla w glebie.
whatever you
Po to to
have,
jest.
for example, carbon
Takich
credits
zagregowanych danych,
linked
myślę,
to your
potrzebujemy
soil.
i od tego powinien
We
zacząć
need
się
this
moim
aggregated
zdaniem
data,
rozwój.
and
Żeby
this
zrobić ten
is
pierwszy
where
krok,
development
zacząć w ogóle
begins. This is the
systematycznie
first step.
kolekcjonować, agregować
You
dane
need
ze
to
wszystkich gospodarstw. Przede
collect
wszystkim też
data in a
zacząć od
systematic manner.
systematyki, co jest gospodarstwem, w sensie kto jest rolnikiem, czynnym rolnikiem.
And we need
Bo
to know
problem i
who
patologia,
are
która
active
jest, wiemy, ile
farmers.
mamy gospodarstw w Polsce według
We know
danych.
the number of farmers, officially 1,400,000.
Niecałe chyba, ja nie wiem, może chyba według mnie nawet mniej, 400 000 to są
But
aktywni
I
rolnicy,
believe
którzy są
only
rolnikami,
400,000 or so are
żyją z
actual
rolnictwa, sprzedają
active
towary, utrzymują
farmers
swoje rodziny.
that make a
Więc to też-
living
to jest,
by
to myślę, że tu trzeba naprawdę bardzo mocno
producing things in those farms
że tak powiem,
and
współpracować i nie
supporting the
tylko u nas
families
lokalnie w Polsce
out
z
of these
Ministerstwem
farms.
Rolnictwa, ale
So
przede
we
wszystkim
need to
też z
work
Komisją
together
Europejską,
with a
żeby
number
móc
of
tak to zrobić.
ministries
Dziękuję bardzo.
with
Czyli
Brussels to actually
zbieranie
do it
danych
well.
podstawą opłacalności, ale nie tylko to, bo tutaj dużo mówiliśmy o dywersyfikacji. Tu
We
bym
have
chciała jeszcze
been speaking about
pani Annę się
diversification
zapytać
quite a
o tą
lot. So a question to
opłacalność,
Anna.
w kontekście
Profitability
dywersyfikacji stosowania
in the
środków
context of
produkcji,
diversification
mikrobiologicznych, jak
and
pani mogła
microbiological
więcej,
products.
powiedzieć, jakie
Could you
korzyści po prostu
please
płyną
tell
z
us
ich stosowania, bo
more
opłacalności
about
nie
the
są tylko
benefits that you
korzyści
have when
ekonomiczne,
you
ale
use them?
również
It is
korzyści
not only about
środowiskowe.
the money, but also about the
Tak, i te korzyści
environment that
środowiskowe
benefits.
są
Yes,
bardzo ważne. Ja
the
jeszcze tutaj
environmental
odniosę się
benefits
do
are very
państwa wcześniejszych
important.
wypowiedzi
I will
odnośnie
follow up
tego
on what you
przepływu
said
informacji
before, the
i
information
współpracy
flow
pomiędzy
and
nauką a
the
praktyką
cooperation
rolniczą.
between
To gdzieś
the
jeszcze
academia
ciągle kuleje,
and
chociaż
farming
jest bardzo duży
practitioners.
progres i postęp w tym
It's
kierunku,
not
bo
as
zarówno
good as it could be,
instytuty
although there's been
naukowe, jak i
improvement.
wszelkie
Scientific
uczelnie,
institutes,
na podstawie swoich
universities,
badań wprowadzają cały szereg
they
danych
conduct
do obrotu, do
research
publikacji,
and they
do
take the
upowszechnienia.
data that
Jest cały
stems from
szereg
it
szkoleń,
and
konferencji branżowych.
introduce into
Również
general
prowadzone są w
circulation.
instytutach takie modele doświadczalne,
There are
jeśli
also
chodzi o praktykę rolniczą. W
special
zakładach rolniczych, zakładach doświadczalnych są takie prowadzone
models,
doświadczenia modelowe, na które
experimental
są również
models,
zapraszani praktycy
and
rolnicy,
practitioners,
którzy mogą
farmers
zapoznać
are
się z daną
invited
technologią,
so
z
that they
daną
can
metodą
learn
uprawy,
about
z danym
any
czynnikiem,
given
który zostanie w tym polu,
method
zastosowany.
or
Tutaj
solution
wciąż
that's
brakuje
been
takiej
used and
osoby
applied and tested.
spinającej te wszystkie
But
działania.
we find
Bo to, co z
this
swojej
player
strony
that would
wykonuje
bring
nauka,
other players
instytuty,
together, it's missing.
to jest przekazywane naszą drogą do praktyki
Because
rolniczej,
we,
naszymi kanałami poprzez
the academics, the
doradców rolnych,
researchers,
poprzez praktykę
we
rolną.
cooperate
Również są
with
zapraszani
farming advisors,
przedsiębiorcy.
we
Natomiast
invite
wciąż jakby ta
entrepreneurs,
komunikacja
we try to
jest
communicate,
gdzieś niepełna
and yet
i to
this
upowszechnianie tej
communication
wiedzy,
is not as good as
przekazywanie
it
tych
could
ważnych
be.
wartości do
And
praktyki
we
gdzieś
would
ciągle,
like this
jest taka
knowledge,
potrzeba, żeby to
this
czynić
information
więcej.
better to
Jest coraz
be
mniej też szkół
disseminated.
rolniczych, tak? Bo
Also,
w pewnym
there is a
sensie
decreasing
przez
number of
jakiś czas,
farming schools.
rolnictwo nie było modne.
Farming
Teraz bardzo dobrze, że
has not
wciąż
been
to na tą
fashionable
tapetę
for some time.
ważności i tej mody
And
wraca. I ta dbałość o
now
środowisko
it
glebowe
is
też jest w tym aspekcie bardzo ważne.
coming back.
I odpowiadając na pani pytanie odnośnie
To answer your question,
preparatów
you
mikrobiologicznych, czy
spoke
wszelkich
of
preparatów
microbiologicals
mających na celu
or any
albo poprawę
products
gleby, albo
that
poprawę składników,
aim to improve the
udostępnianie tych
quality
składników
of the
pokarmowych
soil.
dla roślin. Bo nie wszystkie preparaty mają ten komponent mikrobiologiczny.
Mind
Często
you,
są
only
to
some
na
products
przykład
have
kwasy
this
humusowe,
microbiological
aminokwasy,
component. Sometimes you've got
czy takie
amino
stymulatory
acids, you've
wzrostu.
got
Często są
humus,
dodawane
growth
jakieś czynniki
stimulators,
wzrostu. Więc obok
growth
tych wszystkich
agents are
preparatów
added to
mikrobiologicznych
those
jest cały
products.
szereg
So you've
innych
got
preparatów,
microbiologicals,
które
but
też mają
also
zadziałać
a whole
pozytywnie
line
albo na
of
środowisko glebowe, albo na
other
samą roślinę.
products that are supposed to
Czy to jest
positively impact
opłacalne?
the soil.
W mojej opinii tak,
Does
bo
it
to
pay?
nie tylko
Is it
aspekt ekonomiczny,
financially beneficial? I
zwiększenia
believe
plonu,
so.
ale też zwiększenia na przykład
It's not
jakości
only
tego
about
plonu.
boosting the yield, but also
Czyli jakość
boosting the
otrzymanego
quality of
produktu
the yield. The
będzie
quality
wyższa,
of the
będzie mieć
product
większą, wyższą
will
zawartość na
be
przykład białka.
better.
To
you will have a higher protein content if you use them. Coming back to the microbiological activity in the soil, it all translates into the soil, but also into the crops, the yields. The plants will simply operate better, certain processes will work better, and yields will be also better. And we might compare mineral fertilization with microbiologicals on price. What do we see then?
Well, it's difficult to quote just one determining factor. We should avoid going towards total replacement of the existing product with products with microorganisms. It's about reasonable fertilization with mineral components. Microbiological components or products are to supplement it and to activate certain biological processes in soil which are inhibited. Well, that is to stimulate the microbiological life. We want soil to be in the best and active conditions for the future. And as I mentioned, we have a whole array of microorganisms and fungi introduced into these microorganisms by binding nitrogen, by secretion of certain hormones or growth factors. And it was also about inhibiting certain plant pathogens. And it's about improving the very structure of the soil. And there are certain raisins that create a certain knot, full of knot structure of the soil. Would that generate a higher yield on crops? I believe so, because every type of activation would generate some economic benefits, both for the condition of the soil and for the crops. It is important to convey the information about the products in the right way. Obviously, the necessary information is on packaging. Farmers, though, tend to be quite suspicious and quite skeptical about the information given by producers. So I think this is the role of science, to support the information, to increase the rank of the information. This is how we validate results of our research. We should care about the fertility of our soil by activating that microenvironment. We have few minutes of this panel left. These regenerative practices occupy a very high position on the agenda of many strategies. It's not only about the SGO. So the important question right now is about conveying the message to those who sell it and those who buy it. How to convince them that such preparations, such methods and measures are profitable. How to share our knowledge. Anna.
To możemy, tak, oczywiście, to może dwa słowa tutaj pozwólmy jeszcze powiedzieć pani Ani i przejdziemy
Perhaps Anna can add to that, and then we'll move to other panels and questions. As for food producers, I think all entities that are directly in touch with farmers receive many questions. So by 2030, all these entities must have about 100% of regenerative farmers with the right emission balance. Then we are often invited as consultants, and we continue working on other factors such as water and biodiversity. So most likely we will be producing two other credits, which are less measurable. Yesterday, me and Eric, we had this interesting discussion about measurability of certain criteria. Well, the criteria that we measure for now, these are estimations. In my opinion, we will not come up with a big database. And according to the latest trends on the carbon credit market, that was the British emission of 2024, credits are going to have different quality levels, better and of lower quality. We are only at the beginning of that process. If you go to a farmer in Poland and ask directly about these carbon credits, I think some farmers would just believe that these are some direct payments for heating purposes. So these are my concerns that at the right time we failed to communicate our objectives. Then, if we combine and connect the goals of the criteria of these companies that need to have that result by 2030 with farmers, we need to work from scratch with every farm. We need to have more people who can do that. There are quite many companies for now that would gladly lease their hectares to farmers so they could learn from them. And I agree that those who do not have full picture, they require some technical support. And it's quite difficult to jump into deep water. I think very few people here would agree or decide to start with this new project where the connection between business and science, well, that has accelerated. But there are certain practices that we can use and apply over 1 year. And then we have certain practices with which we start from scratch. We analyze the type of crops which are worth growing on a certain type of soil. And with all that, farmers learn that it profits to have that spread over a larger acreage. In business, there are funds, there are many sources of funds to support farmers. When farmers promise to limit their own emissions and they can receive support, and there are certain businesses that create such carbon credits. In my opinion, though, we have quite outdated method of notifying and informing farmers about the connection between emissions and the carbon ticket. We need that ABC approach. We need this approach that would offer a very simple method. I do not expect the members of the academia to work on that. It's not the role. People have done great research. We have access to knowledge. And now this is the right time to start with the micro-learning. And I get results of soil analysis, and I can see certain deficiencies in plants, and I get yield at the great level, and I get a film of like a 3-minute video presenting and explaining what could have gone wrong in my crops, in my method. In Germany, there are some solutions, there are some systems like Solbit. All the data is compiled in one software. then farmers receive short videos, and these short videos answer the key question, what can be done about that? One thing is to get research results or test results, but these results must be interpreted. We have about 2% of the people who can interpret data. So we should focus on cascading our training. We have funds for that. We should streamline all the procedures, no matter whether it's about liming, no matter it's about educating farmers in acquisition of financial tools. Well, this is another field because the economic education, business education of farmers is non-existent. We shouldn't blame these hard-working, very active people for that. Well, I think it's very difficult to be a farmer right now because you need to be a jack of all trades, and no one can do it in a responsible manner. Well, I think cloning would be one way to go about that. So perhaps we could be training farmers, but then we could also offer a system of external consultants. Krzysztof Gawęcki said yesterday during his debate that in farming, according to EU estimations, we have about 4% of the population. And we should be aware that our work is that important, where the 4% of people should feed the remaining 98%. And this is what we do. We have to produce, well, generate food. We have to feed all of you from field to fork. So we must have this awareness. We need to go out there. We need to try new methods. We need to try and change things. So if we are to talk about sustainable, regenerative development, we need to reach that stage in our mind that we say, well, from now on, let me change my method. I might look for an expert. I might look for textbooks or manuals or instruction videos. In our channel, we have quite many videos presenting different approaches to soil testing. On our YouTube, we have recordings from conference with experts from the US they came to Poland and they started explaining what is important, what should we start with. So let us look for different institutions, let us look for practitioners. The number of regenerative farms is growing, and let's draw from their experience and let's dwell on it, because, well, the best case scenario is when we want to be as good as our neighbor. So we need to share knowledge, and we have farms in Poland that can do it. We need to reach them also through an institution like ours. We should not be afraid to go to these people, to talk about their production. Well, I think our time is up. I'm very grateful for your answers. I think we have one question from the floor. Thank you. I have this very short question.
How many farms are there like that? We have some farms that have been applying that solutions. You can take a horse to water, but you cannot make them drink. So the question is, how many farms have been taking in all this knowledge and experience? Do you have any information on the numbers? You are telling us about beautiful research. I also work in science, I do research, and I know how difficult it is to pass on this knowledge, this information that you've uncovered. So you've got these lofty things, but the question is, how many farms have been applying these practices?
Takich gospodarstw, które już myślę, można ich jako takich przykładów używać i czerpać od nich wiedzę, to niestety na razie będzie.
When it comes to those that are role models that you can learn from, I believe there are dozens of them. I'm not even sure that there are hundreds of
Myślę, że
them.
tak, jeżeli mówilibyśmy o takich wzorcowych, które od A do Z przeszły proces i są
When it
10
comes
lat
to
już, tak,
proper role
w
model
pełnym wymiarze, to może rzeczywiście
farms
będziemy
that have
mieli,
been
nie
doing
wiem,
that
setkę,
for 10
dwusetkę
years,
takich
maybe
gospodarstw, bo
we
wielu
could
nie
have
wiemy.
100, maybe 200.
Natomiast
There are
jeżeli
many
byśmy patrzyli,
that
ile
we
jest
don't
w
know
procesie,
about.
to myślę, że możemy
But there are
spokojnie na
many
podstawie choćby
that are in the
kilku czynników,
process.
tak żeby się odwołać do jakiejś statystyki, szacować. Czyli na przykład mamy sprzęty do
You can look at a number of factors. For example, the type of equipment that is necessary to do
możemy
this
spojrzeć
form
na
of
dane
farming.
dotyczące skorzystania z
What else can
programów
you look
pomocowych,
at?
które
You can
finansowały na
look
przykład
at
uprawy
various
uproszczone.
programs
I
that
możemy też na przykład
finance
posługiwać się badaniami
this reduced
statystycznymi
tillage
wykonanymi
farming.
na większej grupie rolników, gdzie zadamy proste
And
pytania
statistical
o konkretne praktyki, których
sampling.
używają.
You can
To będzie,
ask
myślę, między
people,
10
you
a
can ask
15%
them,
na
you
dzień
can
dzisiejszy.
poll them.
Jeżeli
And
byśmy mówili,
this
tak jak mówię,
would
o tym,
mean
kto jest
10
w
to
uprawie uproszczonej,
15%.
kto stosuje międzyplony, kto
You
ma
could
ograniczenia
talk
w
about
chemizacji,
intercrops, who
kto
uses
stosuje
those,
dane
or
i w
reduced
ogóle
tillage,
bada
who
i
uses
NVI-em,
that.
za pomocą badań satelitarnych jakby swoje gospodarstwo
Who
regularnie, tak? Stosuje
uses satellite
nawożenie
imaging,
precyzyjne, jeżeli w
who
ogóle
uses
stosuje je, bo są i tacy, którzy decydują
precision
się na stosowanie
fertilization,
środków,
and
przy czym
some
przychylam się tu w pełni do tego,
refuse
o
to
czym pani
use
mówi i nawet
fertilization at
specjaliści
all.
nasi, którzy w tej chwili nas szkolą intensywnie
Mind you,
z szwajcarskiego fibra,
even
mówią jasno, że
our
na
Swiss
start są
experts
potrzebne
say
pewne
that
dawki
to begin with,
niezbędne i trzeba
you
monitorować,
do
kiedy i co
need
dołożyć.
certain
Także
dosage,
powiedziałabym, że to nie jest,
and
nie
then you
wygląda tak źle,
monitor
ale
and
gospodarstwa
add
bardzo
something
rzadko
when
też
it's
będą się tym
necessary.
dzieliły z dwóch powodów.
But farms
Eryk też o
tend
tym
not to
wspomniał.
share it
Też
for
dlatego,
two
że są
reasons.
uważane za
Eric has
często jak jest
mentioned
jeden
that.
taki gospodarz
Imagine that you
we
have
wsi,
one such
że
farmer
rozpoczął tą
in a
drogę, jest
given
uważany za
village.
szaleńca, tak?
And
W ogóle robi
many
jakieś
of
rzeczy,
his neighbors will
których nie
consider him
rozumiemy. My wszyscy
insane
pryskamy, on nie wychodzi
because
w ogóle.
they
O co?
don't
Także to
understand
nie
him.
tylko jest
We are
temat polski, bo w
spraying and
Holandii byłam w bardzo
he's
dużym
not.
gospodarstwie
I visited this large regenerative farm in the
ma to
Netherlands.
porównanie, bo też dzierżawi część gleb i część gleb jest w systemie
They
konwencjonalnym,
lease
bo
some of the land
osoba, która
and some of the
dzierżawi
land
glebę, nie pozwala w ogóle
is
na to, żeby
farmed
wejść z
conventionally
regeneratywą.
because the
Ziemniak
owner
pokazał
doesn't want
prawdę,
any
bo
other
po 8 latach
kind of
uprawy
farming.
ziemniaka w systemie
8
regeneratywnym
years,
i w
this is
konwencjonalnym
how long
przyszły
they've been
to było w okolicach
producing
Rotterdamu.
potatoes
Przyszły ulewne
in
deszcze w
two
okresie zbioru
styles,
przez 3
regenerative and
tygodnie pod rząd.
traditional.
Ziemniak
And they had
konwencjonalny
rainfall 3
ekonomicznie
weeks.
wyglądał na super rentownego, tak z 30% lepiej niż ziemniak regeneratywny,
So,
biorąc pod uwagę wszystkie czynniki produkcji.
The traditional crops, potato crops, look very
a ziemniak
profitable.
regeneratywny po ustąpieniu deszczy w przeciągu 4
But
dni
the
był
thing
zrobiony.
is,
Dziękuję, Aniu. Tu
after
są
this
jeszcze kolejne
rainfall,
pytania. Ja tylko jeszcze
the
powiem, że w takim
traditional farmed potato basically drowned while the new approach
o tym
worked.
też aspekcie ekonomicznym i
Yes, the
społecznym,
economic aspect is quite important.
My współpracujemy teraz, myślę, że już śmiało będzie można powiedzieć o jakichś niecałych 100 000 hektarów gospodarstw w Polsce, z którymi
cooperating with farms that are responsible for 100,000 hectares altogether. So you will always find somebody within the radius of a few dozen kilometers. You'll always find a farm that has been on that path for a few years, that are in the process. I suggest one more question, because we are already delayed.
Proszę bardzo.
If I may add.
Rolnikom. Roman Putała, gospodarstwo na polderze braniewskim. I tak, ja sieję rzepak
I sow, rape in August, wheat in September, and the minister will tell me how many hectares I was supposed to lie fallow last year, and whether I'm supposed to plant something else or not.
wody na dużo
there
wyższym
is
poziomie
this
niż są pola.
canal,
Były przepusto
and there
zastawki.
is water
Wody
table there
polskie
higher than
taką
elsewhere.
przepusto zastawkę wycinają.
And the thing is
Jest
that
susza,
locks
moglibyśmy
are
wpuścić
being removed.
bezpłatnie wodę w
So
rowy, żeby
we
nie poszła
could
gleba w głąb,
allow
ale nie
water to
można,
flow in the
panie Romku.
ditches, but
Same
it's not
papiery 2 lata.
allowed
To może
because it would
pompę.
take 2 years to get a
Program
permit.
na
What about a pump?
dofinansowanie. Nie,
There is a
proszę
special
pana,
program.
pompy nie damy. Co
No,
można
we're
zrobić?
not going to
Plan.
give you a pump.
Studnie
No,
i system nawadniania.
you could dig a well and have a special irrigation
Bez
system,
takiego obszaru
but it's
pompa
going to cost
spompowuje
millions.
wodę. Tutaj 20-30 tysięcy odbudujemy sobie zastawkę, ale nie wolno.
We might
Dziękujemy
rebuild
za
this
podzielenie
lock,
się. To są wyzwania,
but it would
które
cost 20 to 30,000, but we're not allowed to do that. So maybe talk to the decision makers, point it to them.
To może
Because people
dziękuję
say
bardzo.
that
A jeszcze
farmers
jakieś
don't want to
może
do
pytanie
things,
do naszych
but you know,
prelegentów szybkie i potem już przenieśmy się
easy to say
w
these
kuluary.
Gospodarstwo i ciekawy jestem, jaką dochodowość w zeszłym
I'm just
roku mieliście z
interested.
hektara.
What kind of profitability you had last year
oczywiście ma
from
rolnicze
hectare?
zakłady doświadczalne, które prowadzą
There
wiele
are
różnych
special
doświadczeń
experimental farms,
modelowych, na które również zapraszamy, jak już
model
wspominałam,
farms.
praktykę rolniczą i
We
doradców
have
rolnych.
our own
Natomiast
advisors.
jeśli chodzi o gospodarstwa, no to Jung też działa na tych samych zasadach, jak
also
i państwo rolnicy,
operates
więc
the way
jeśli
you
chodzi o
do.
opłacalność w ubiegłym roku, my
So
również
last
byliśmy na
year's
minusie.
profitability,
No,
we were in the red
Wszyscy wiemy, jakie mamy
last year.
ceny zbóż,
We
jak
know what the
zdrożały
grain prices
nawozy,
are
więc
like.
tutaj
We know that
Jung
fertilizers
nie ma jako
were more
instytut
expensive.
żadnych
Our
uprzywilejowanych
institute
sytuacji, jeśli
is
chodzi
not
o praktykę
privileged
rolniczą.
when it
My również działamy
comes
na
to
równi
farming
z państwem,
practices.
na równi z
We
praktyką rolniczą. Natomiast
follow
w
the
tym
same
aspekcie
rules,
również
it's the same playing field.
doświadczeń i
Speaking
gospodarstw,
of
o których
experience,
tutaj wcześniej Pan pytał, to jako instytut my również zapraszamy
We, as an
do
institute,
siebie, na nasze pola doświadczalne,
invite you to
które są
visit
bardzo
our
szeroko
fields,
monitorowane
experimental
przez wiele lat
fields,
pod
and they
kątem
have been
wszelkich
monitored for
różnych
years.
właściwości fizykochemicznych,
Physical
właściwości
and chemical
plonotwórczych.
properties were
Te wszystkie dane
tested.
Instytut posiada i
We
upowszechnia
have all this
i udostępnia,
information.
więc
We are
tutaj
disseminating
nie
all
jest
this
tajemnicą,
information.
jeśli chodzi o Instytut,
There are no
aby
secrets
osoba,
here.
która się do nas zgłosi o takie informacje,
You can
mogła takie
simply reach
informacje
out and
pozyskać,
you
więc tą
will
swoją
learn
wiedzą
what
jak
we
najbardziej
know.
się dzielimy.
So we do
Natomiast
share
jako
this knowledge
praktyka
that we
rolnicza
have.
również borykamy się z tymi wszystkimi
We,
problemami,
as farming
z którymi się
practitioners,
boryka oczywiście
are
rolnictwo.
facing the
Bardzo
same
dziękuję,
issues
bardzo
that you are
Państwu dziękuję
facing.
za
Thank you very much.
tą debatę, za tą rozmowę.
Thank you for this
Widzę, że
debate,
trochę pytań jeszcze
for
jest,
this
ale tutaj zostawię
conversation. I know
Państwu
that there are
już naszych
more
prelegentów w
questions,
kuluarach, jak
but
będą
you
pytania.
can
A ja z mojej strony
discuss that during the
dziękuję
break.
tutaj wszystkim właśnie
Thank you
prelegentom i też zapraszam
to
Państwa
all
na
the
kolejne
speakers.
debaty, kolejne
Join
panele.
us
O
for more panels
11:10
and
będziemy
debates.
rozmawiać o roli kobiet
Later,
w
we will
rolnictwie.
talk
Myślę, że to
about
też
the
ważny
role of
temat.
women
Dziękuję.
in farming, which I believe is also a very important subject. I'm
W internecie
waiting
nic nie ginie, rękopisy nie płoną.
for
Więc
the
warto zaczekać
signal.
na ten
Nothing
streaming.
will be lost online.
I zaczynamy. Szanowni
And
Państwo, jesteśmy w
manuscripts are not
Jasionce
going
pod
to burn. We are in
Rzeszowem.
Jasionka,
Zielona energia
close
na
to
obszarach
Rzeszów.
wiejskich to temat
Green
tego panelu,
energy
który teraz zaczniemy.
in the
Omówimy go ze
countryside, in
specjalistami
the rural
z
regions.
sektora
We will
nauki,
discuss that
z
with
politykami,
various experts,
praktykami.
academics,
Będziemy
politicians,
rozmawiać w tym
practitioners,
wąskim, ale dogodnym gronie o
sit
tym,
on
jak
this
rozwijać
panel,
źródła
and we will
odnawialne,
talk about how to
także
develop
różne rodzaje
green
gazu
energy sources
odnawialnego
and
na
various
wsi.
forms of
Zapraszam
renewable
Krzysztofa Dziaduszyńskiego,
gas.
praktyka
Krzysztof
sektora
Dziaduszyński
który
is
jest
a
tutaj z nami. Dzień
renewables
dobry, wielkie brawa dla niego.
practitioner. He is with us,
Zaproszę
sir.
również pana Sebastiana
Sebastian Grzegorczyk,
dyrektora
another panelist.
do spraw hodowli
He's a
zwierząt
director
odnawionych w firmie Agrofert.
at Agrofert.
Jeszcze raz witam. Będzie z nami też pan profesor Krzysztof Księżopolski
Professor
ze
Krzysztof
Szkoły Głównej Handlowej.
Księżopolski from
Sektor
the
nauki,
Warsaw
badania od
University.
lat. Miejsc może
of
być za
Natural
mało i zaraz
Sciences.
sobie z tym poradzimy.
There
Bo
may
będzie
not
jeszcze
be
Ryszard,
enough seats, but we will
Pawlik,
manage. Ryszard Pawlik
który
is also
jest
going to
doradcą
join us.
Jerzego Buzka w Parlamencie Europejskim.
He
Zajmuje się
is
regulacjami na rzecz
an advisor to
europejskiego
Jerzy Buzek,
zielonego
a Polish MEP.
ładu. I pan,
He's
jak
been
się pan
working
przedstawić,
with the
przepraszam.
Grzegorz Gałczyński z Polskiej Agencji
European
Inwestycji i Handlu.
Dokładnie tak,
New
bo coś nam
Deal.
się tu z krzesełkami stało i kurczę, zaraz rozwiążemy
Not
to
enough
wyzwanie. Nadciąga jeszcze
chairs,
jedno.
but we will solve this problem.
I bardzo
I
dobrze.
can see another seat is
I
being
to jest
brought
właśnie elastyczność i
as I
sprawność
speak.
na polskiej wsi. Tak
So
właśnie
this
sobie
is the
poradzimy z
kind of
transformacją energetyczną, o
flexibility
której będziemy
that you can experience in the
rozmawiać.
Polish
Są
countryside,
wyzwania,
and this is how we're going
rozwiązujemy
to
je od
challenge
razu,
the energy transformation.
Szanowni
Challenges can be
panowie,
solved
rozmawiamy
on
o
the
zielonej
spot.
energii na obszarach
Gentlemen,
wiejskich. Zacznijmy
green
od porcji
energy
wiedzy od naukowca,
in the
który nam
rural
powie
areas.
na liczbach,
Let us
czyli tak jak
begin
lubimy, czy to w biznesie,
with
czy to
an
na roli,
academic.
żeby
He will
konkretnie
give us numbers.
zobaczyć, jaki jest ten
We
potencjał
will see
transformacji
what the
energetycznej. Z
potential
panem
for
profesorem
energy
od lat o tym
transformation
rozmawiamy
is there.
przy różnych
We
okazjach,
have
także
talked
tutaj w
about it with
Rzeszowie.
the professor for
Gdzie
years
jesteśmy
now,
dzisiaj
also
w
here in
24 roku?
Rzeszów. Where do we stand in 2024? Hello.
Na ten panel. Ten panel
Thank
będzie
you for
w dużym
being
stopniu o
here.
pieniądzach.
We will largely discuss the money.
Myślę, że będziecie mieli taką dobrą informację, co robić i gdzie są
I believe you will learn what to do,
biznesowe.
where
Natomiast
business
wracając
risks can be found.
Wojtku, do twojego
Wojtek,
pytania, to
to answer your question,
obszary wiejskie są takim, moim zdaniem, największym beneficjentem
the
transformacji
rural
energetycznej.
areas are the biggest beneficiary of the energy transformation. The people who live there are the beneficiaries. Where do we stand? Where are we? The Polish energy policy till 2024 could be a reference point. I know it's no longer valid. It was basically out of date when it was being presented because the assumptions were what they were. You get that in a number of countries. I remember I co-authored a paper 8 years ago on that subject jointly with a professor from Dresden. It was being peer-reviewed and then published, and we had to change the text because data was changing.
Tak, no to powiem tak, że mamy
So
w
renewables
polskiej
in the Polish
polityce
countryside.
energetycznej
We have this Polish
2030
energy policy
rok, fotowoltaika.
and photovoltaics
Przekroczony.
for
Mamy
2030,
2024.
it's
Cel
already
2040.
exceeded, and another
Przekroczony.
target for 2040
Więc
already
jak gdyby, jeżeli
met
na to
and
popatrzymy,
exceeded.
na samą fotowoltaikę,
So,
to
if you
jesteśmy
look
w
at
bardzo dobrym
photovoltaics,
miejscu.
we
I
are in
tutaj
a very
też,
good place indeed.
podziękowania dla Fundacji, bo
A thank you to the
Państwo
foundation
możecie
here.
na stronach internetowych Fundacji znaleźć szereg publikacji.
You can find a
raportów.
number of papers and
Książki,
reports
też pod
on the
redakcją
website of the
pana
foundation.
profesora Buzka i
Some have
dotyczącą
been
właśnie
edited
rozwoju
by
OZE.
Professor Buzek
Jeśli
and
na
myself.
bariery
They
administracyjne,
cover
więc taki mały
renewables,
kamyczek,
how
że
red tape
my
was
też,
cut,
tutaj dołożyliśmy swojego.
and
Mamy
we
ponad
have
1,5 miliona
helped a bit.
prosumentów. To jest bardzo dużo.
We've got
Natomiast mówimy, to
1.5
są
million
instalacje,
prosumers. It's a lot. These are micro installations,
biznes jest,
though.
troszkę gdzie indziej, tak? Czyli w
Business
dużych
like ourselves
instalacjach.
were,
I tutaj,
because
jeżeli
business
chodzi
is
o
about
biogaz,
big installations.
to ja
Biogas.
jestem głębokim zwolennikiem tej tej technologii.
I am a great fan of this technology. It is a renewable technology and you can control it.
Z Uniwersytetu Poznańskiego,
And you have those numbers from the University of Poznań.
Czyli tyle,
1
co było
million cubic
samego biogazu. I gdzie jesteśmy w
meters you can get from biogas alone. Where are we
To
there?
właśnie wyliczenia profesora Dacha.
Professor Dach
Ja bym
has
powiedział, że
made
nawet
some
więcej niż
calculations.
trochę tak
I would say
konserwatywnie
that he
do
was
tego podszedł.
conservative in his
To jest pewien
calculations.
potencjał, tak?
But the
Natomiast
potential is there,
ten potencjał,
any way you
tego
slice it.
potencjału w ogóle nie wykorzystujemy.
We have not tapped into it. We've hardly used it at all, this potential. The question is why?
Dlaczego nie zwiększamy swojego
Why haven't we improved our energy security by means of producing biogas, biomethane?
Chyba w dalszej kolejności przejdziemy do
Przejdziemy, tak.
Czyli
We will
inaczej mówiąc
discuss
krótko,
it
tylko, bo tutaj
further down the line. I know there are many speakers, so I'll be
wpisuje
brief.
się to w polską
The
politykę
potential is there.
energetyczną,
It's aligned with the Polish
jeżeli
energy
chodzi o
policy.
zasady, natomiast
In-
na zasadzie, na poziomie
principle.
oprzyrządowania i problemów
Let's talk
natury
about
strukturalnej,
instruments and
to po prostu nie
structural
działa.
issues.
Tak? Czyli
Basically, when
jeżeli
it
nie
comes to
idziemy po
structure, it
prostu
doesn't work.
w tym kierunku, też
We
jakby
are
za
not
chwilę
heading in this
to
direction.
pokażę Państwu, tak powiem,
If
na
I have
konkretnym
time,
przykładzie
I
modelu
will
biznesowego,
use
jaka jest
an
wrażliwość
example,
tego typu instalacji na
a business model to show
na
you
zmiany cen.
how
chęcią
sensitive
tego,
that
do
solution
Cieni
is to
pewnie publiczność
price
wysłucha. Na
changes.
konkretach się dowiemy, jak to wygląda,
So we'll
ale jeszcze
see how it
poziom
works.
unijny. Ryszard Pawlik,
example,
na co
Ryszard
dzień w
Pawlik.
Brukseli, zajmujący się
From
między innymi
Brussels,
przepisami Europejskiego Zielonego Ładu
you
Odnawialnego.
deal with
We
the
wszystkich przypadkach
European
tutaj na tej konferencji,
Green
włącznie z
Deal
konferencją z udziałem pana
regulations
ministra przed
discussed
chwilą.
widely and broadly,
Jak,
especially here.
w 2024 roku
A question,
wsparcie
2024.
rolniczej, energetyki odnawialnej, zielonych technologii.
Let's talk about the
wygląda z,
support for renewables in the
punktu
countryside
widzenia
for
przepisów
farmers.
brukselskich.
What does it look like from the point of view
Dzień dobry,
of
witam
the
państwa
Brussels
Przede wszystkim myślę, że
legislative
ostatnie parę lat
landscape?
uświadomiły
Hello.
wszystkim w Unii Europejskiej, którzy być może
Everybody
wcześniej świadomości
in
nie mieli.
the EU
Zawsze jak rozmawialiśmy o
has
polityce
learned some things in the
energetycznej,
last few
to
years. Whenever we
głównie
talked
to też
about
taki
the
polski
energy
postulat.
policy,
Od lat mówiliśmy o bezpieczeństwie
Poland has
energetycznym, w tym
postulated
kontekście o dywersyfikacji
how important energy
źródeł,
security
kierunków
is, that it's
dostaw
important to
energii.
diversify
Natomiast, głównie po tym,
your
co
energy
wydarzyło się w
sources.
lutym
We know what
2022
happened
roku
in
po
February 2022. This is when this full-scale Russian invasion on Ukraine started. This is when people realized that energy security is important and diversification is a part of that. Also, we should stress more our self-reliance. By ours, I mean the EU.
No i niewątpliwie tej samowystarczalności, czy takiej możliwie daleko posuniętej niezależności, bo oczywiście
Yes, and we
termin się
need
chyba
to
nigdy nie da
be
osiągnąć, ale
independent.
tej samowystarczalności czy niezależności energetycznej Polski nie będzie
Independent,
bez
self-reliant,
samowystarczalności czy niezależności
but
energetycznej
that is only
polskiej wsi. To jest
possible
też
if the Polish countryside is independent and self-reliant. So regulations, which would help energy.
Na pewno zaktualizowana ostatnio dyrektywa o odnawialnych źródłach energii.
Dissemination. There is this Renewable Energy Sources Directive. You've heard of the Polish objectives. There are also the European objectives for 2030.
Emisji gazów cieplarnianych do 2030 roku, przypomnę, co najmniej 55%
There is this objective 55% reduction minimum.
W odnawialnych źródłach energii to jest 42,5% dla Unii Europejskiej.
42.5 for the EU, and there is this aspiration to reach 45. What does it mean for Poland?
Nie jest jeszcze dokładnie wyliczone, natomiast patrząc też na to,
proper calculations
cel do
yet.
roku 2020, to
But
oznacza,
we can
że
look
jako
at our
Polska
2020 target. We, Poland, would need 31 to 34%. This is what we would need, I believe, in 2030. Is it doable?
Przypomnę, że w
I'll remind you.
grudniu na COP28 w Dubaju
In Dubai, in December, COP28, a declaration was signed, co-signed by the Polish government, and we declared that by 2030, renewables share would be tripled. We had 15% some time ago, And that
w sferze
means
deklaracji, do tego,
that
żeby gdzieś tam
at least on
między 45 a
paper
50% oscylować w
we are
2030 roku.
ready to have 45 to 50 in 2030. Is the countryside ready for that?
Mnie z perspektywy Brukseli to ciężko
Well, from
oceniać,
the
ale
point
myślę,
of
że
view of
tego typu
Brussels, it's hard to say.
konferencje czy fora dokładnie temu mają służyć, żeby
But these fora are
żeby tą
supposed to help
świadomość też
that,
budować.
To się dzieje.
to build
Tak, ja
awareness.
myślę, że
It's
też
happening,
wracając
yes.
do twojego pytania na początku, że
To
to
come
jest w
back to
dużej
your
mierze
question.
kwestia jednak tego, jak będziemy, znaczy tu już nie chodzi o
Largely,
więcej regulacji, bo myślę, że
it is
regulacji
not
mamy
so much about
wystarczająco
regulations
dużo,
because we've got
celów,
enough of
jakby
those.
Uważam, że dobrze, że sobie stawiamy
We've
je
got our
ambitne z
targets,
wyprzedzeniem czasowym.
ambitious
Natomiast teraz już
objectives
chodzi tylko o to,
defined
żeby
ahead of
to
time.
mądrze, skutecznie
Now it is
implementować, czy
about
poprzez
implementing
jakieś
it the
regulacje, ale
smart
mówię,
way.
tylko takie, które mają pomóc osiągać już to, co
So that it will
ustaliliśmy,
help you,
a nie czynić jakieś nowe ustalenia.
help us to
Poprzez,
reach the
również,
goals and targets that
zastanowienie się,
we
jak
already
można to
have.
wspierać
Also,
finansowo
we need to
w nowym
support how to
wieloletnim budżecie Unii po
finance it
2027 roku,
after
jakby to wszystko mieć z
2027.
tyłu.
We need to
Właśnie,
have it
piłka jest w grze,
in the back of
ale
our
ta gra się
heads.
już toczy, nie
The
rozmawiamy,
game
czy to się
is
dzieje, bo to się
already
dzieje,
on.
widzimy na liczbach, widzimy
Things
po
are
sygnałach
already
z Brukseli.
happening.
Są różne europejskie sygnały, którym też
There are
Izba
various
Handlowa
European
przygląda
messages
i zanim
and
wylądujemy w Polsce niczym te
trade
samoloty
chamber
tutaj
is
w
taking
Rzeszowie
closer
Jasiące,
look.
to spójrzmy z lotu ptaka na
So
europejskie
first,
przykłady takiej
let's look at the
transformacji.
European
Państwo śledzą
examples
na bieżąco
of this transformation.
sytuację,
We've been
jakieś
following
dobre
the situation.
przykłady, dobre praktyki, które
So tell us
Państwo
about good
stwierdzili, które mogą być
examples.
inspiracją dla nas tutaj na sali.
That could be a source of
Europejskie to
inspiration
takie
for
dosyć duże
us.
zawężenie, bo prawdę mówiąc mam dużo zastrzeżeń co do
I've got a
europejskiego
number of
podejścia
reservations when it comes
regulowania
to
w
the
ogóle
European
energetyki
approach
odnawialnej.
to regulating
My obserwujemy
the
jako
European energy
Polska Agencja
market.
Inwestycji i Handlu sytuację
Our
na rynkach
agency,
światowych.
Polish
Ale musimy zawężyć
agency,
to pytanie
has
może
been
do kwestii tych przepisów, tak?
following what's happening
Skupmy się
globally.
na tym, w jaki sposób
But you
powinniśmy
asked about
tworzyć przepisy,
regulations, how
bo jakby
these should be
biznesowo
drafted.
My jesteśmy w bardzo dobrym położeniu.
Business-wise, we are in a very good place when it comes to renewables.
Technologii.
Can
Też
easily
mamy stosunkowo
obtain
dobre
technology.
warunki, tak? Natomiast
The conditions are good,
i problem
but the
leży
devil is
właśnie
in
w
the
wersji
detail.
przepisów wykonawczych. Teraz,
It's about the enforcement.
jak to mamy Europejski Zielony Ład,
The
bardzo, że tak
European
powiem,
New Deal
flashy
is
and
there,
shiny, jak to się
flashy
w
and
biznesie,
shiny,
1
as
trylion
business says.
euro przeznaczonych na zieloną transformację, natomiast
A lot of money
dlaczego ta
for
transformacja
the
przegrywa
European
chociażby z konkurencją
transformation.
amerykańską, tak?
But there is
Więc
this
Amerykanie
American
zastosowali
movement too.
bardzo ciekawy
The
mechanizm,
Americans
nazywa
have
się
used
IRA,
IRA, an
Reduction Act,
interesting
który wczoraj
mechanism, Inflation
tak,
Reduction
może inaczej.
Act.
Oni, który udowodnił
Carrot
w ciągu roku,
versus stick.
22 na
In a
23,
year,
dramatyczną
2023,
przewagę nad całym zielonym
proved
ładem
that they had an
europejskim.
advantage over the European solution.
Dokładnie.
And because
Dlaczego to
production
robią?
is being
To
moved.
kwestia podejścia
Yes,
pewnego biznesowego.
it's about the business
Amerykanie,
approach.
stwierdzili,
The
jak
Americans
jeżeli ma jakiś
think
pomysł
like
na biznes,
entrepreneurs. They have an
który ma
idea
ręce i
for
nogi,
business that
to
makes
trzeba go szybko
sense.
zweryfikować,
Either
podjąć
test
decyzję,
it
szybko
quick,
przelać pieniążki na
decide,
konto, tak, żeby mógł
and
realizować swoją
transfer the money to verify if it makes sense or not.
Jakby wszystkie możliwości uwalniania środków z Unii Europejskiej
So then
są
we have
obwarowane tak
lots
wielkim,
of
monstrualnym aparatem
options to
administracyjnym,
release funds
że
from the
my to
EU,
słyszymy od
but then there are
przedsiębiorców,
so many
że trzeba
constraints
czasem jedną albo
to
dwie osoby
receive
zatrudnić
this funding,
dodatkowo
to
w
have them
firmie, żeby
dispersed,
tylko
that
obsługiwały
sometimes
wyłącznie ten
a
właśnie
business
grant.
Właśnie
must
o tym
employ
też
one or two
ministrowie i
people
przedstawiciele sektora
specifically
rolniczego
for
mówili
the
w sali obok,
purpose
mówiąc
of
o tym, że przede wszystkim trzeba
servicing
na
the
początek uprościć
funding.
w ogóle te wszystkie
So
paczki przepisów.
everyone
paczki.
was emphasizing the
Uprościć, ale też
importance
je
of
zebrać w jednym
streamlining
miejscu, ale może
this
skończyć najpierw tą konstrukcję z IRA.
heaps of
Więc
regulations.
jaka była przewaga? W ciągu tego jednego roku 22 na 23
So,
Amerykanie
over,
przyciągnęli
well,
o
on the
miliard
turn of
200 milionów dolarów
20
więcej
to 2023, Americans
inwestycji, z czego
attracted
około tam 267
about
milionów
$1
w
billion
inwestycji
US dollars
wodorowych. To
more
są
of
inwestycje,
investment,
które wpłynęły z
including
rynków de
hydrogen
facto
investment.
europejskich, proszę
And these
państwa.
investment projects,
Dzięki pewnemu
they
prostemu,
leaked out of the
prostej
European
implementacji,
market.
takiej klarowności
And because
przepisów
of
i tego, w jaki
that,
sposób można z nich korzystać, oni wygrali. Jaką
excellent,
odpowiedź dała Unia Europejska?
simplified
Powołano Net Zero
legal
Industry Act, który de
background,
facto jest
that
wyłomem
option won.
w zasadzie
So
takiego
we have
równomiernego
the
rozwoju Unii Europejskiej. To znaczy, że państwa przez określony czas będą mogły powoływać
in the
programy, które będą
European
mogły dodatkowo z własnej puli,
order,
mówię bardzo
countries
ogólnie,
were unable
inwestować,
to
przyciągać tych inwestorów.
come
I
up
co to
with
spowoduje? To
programs
spowoduje, że
that
ci, którzy
could not
napisali to,
invest
tak?
into
No i
the
tutaj mowa o
investors.
Niemcach i Francuzach.
And
Oni w pierwszej kolejności z tego korzystają i przykład pierwszy już Francuzi powołali właśnie taki program z dniem 1 stycznia. Przypominam, że gdzieś w okolicy listopada przecież ten net zero powołany, a Francuzi już z dniem 1 stycznia powołali program, który ma docelowo przynieść im 20 miliardów w postaci właśnie tych wysokotechnologicznych inwestycji.
Gdzie my w tym jesteśmy?
I teraz gdzie my w tym jesteśmy? Jak my powinniśmy konstruować przepisy? No bo to nawet, jak widać, nie trzeba mieć nie wiadomo jakich środków, tylko trzeba być sprytnym. Trzeba być sprytnym. Tutaj można posłużyć się przykładem gospodarki wodorowej. Od 2 lat mówi się o tak zwanej konstytucji wodorowej, czyli z grubsza zebranie wszystkich przepisów właściwych dla budowania gospodarki w jednym miejscu. Także żeby nie były one, bo przepisy są, tylko one są porozpraszane po wszystkich możliwych aktach. Teraz do czego, to jest stara zasada ekonomiczna, do czego prowadzi nadregulacja, komu sprzyja? Nadregulacja i rozproszenie przepisów oczywiście tylko największym graczom, którzy mają możliwości wytworzenia aparatu analitycznego, który jest w stanie poruszać się w tym gąszczu przepisów i budować jakiś biznes. A podczas gdy siła prawdziwa rynkowo-twórcza, czyli MŚP, małe i średnie przedsiębiorstwa, nie mają takich możliwości, żeby po prostu te wszystkie
regulations. Small and medium-sized companies do not have the sufficient capacity to deal with such legislation.
Ale nie sądzę, nie ma implementacji. Powinniśmy jak najszybciej powołać programy, jak najszybciej ściągać przede wszystkim duże strategiczne inwestycje, które pociągną wszystkich małych.
To jest bardzo ważny postulat. Zanim pójdziemy dalej, jeszcze bym poprosił o odpowiedź z uczelni i z
investments ahead.
Profesora
May I have also comments from other panelists, please?
Rozwój w porównaniu z Amerykanami?
How about our support to the development? Do you think that Europe has the right method for supporting that development? I think this is a complex topic, and I think that we could organize a separate panel dedicated to that topic. It's about this common market, well, single market, and the economic assistance and aid. We're different from the US.
Francuzi po prostu mają pieniądze w budżecie, żeby w momencie jak Net Zero Industry Act luzuje pewne,
as you said, Germans and French, well, they do have money and then can release their own funds to the industry. We do not have these funds. Well, perhaps we do, but we spend them onto something else. It's a matter of priority. It's a matter of scale too. But the Zero Industry Act will be processed and voted in the European Parliament. But it's been on the table for a year now. If French and Germans are prepared to vote on it and we are not, well, we'll see. And perhaps the professor could comment on that too. I agree with my colleague here. The EU is very different from the US. We are where we are. We might say that we haven't done certain things, that we are late, but let us look at certain structural issues here in Poland. So let me use biogas as an example. From the point of view of farmers, it might not be the priority. Well, with hydrogen, that is going to take a while because of regulatory issues. But there are certain structural difficulties. The size of farms. If you take the number of biogas plants and juxtapose the number of farms and the size of farms, where biogas plants are built where farms of large acreages are located. So this is the matter of structure, and we need to look at it. Then we need to refer each technology to what is happening on the market. If we talk about biogas, biogas
ziemnym, tak?
is to compete with natural gas, I believe. So the question is whether the investment is going to be profitable, whether it is going to generate a return. I'm not certain what you mean by regulation. We need a set of tools that would offer over the lifetime of a biogas plant, that is 20 to 25 years, a certain rate of return. So this is the matter of accessing the grid. For years, we've been saying that there are issues with connecting to the grid. So with that, we cut off one method of selling the product from biogas plants. When we look at different players, we can see that they respond in many different ways. So access to the grid is another structural problem. And I think I need to stop here. Right, you need to stop here, at least for a moment. And let me go back to the agency. Well, actually, let me refer to that myth that Poland doesn't have sufficient funds to that purpose. Perhaps we didn't 10 or 15 years ago. When the money is here, it is now about the allocation, it is now about the objectives. Obviously, we cannot compare ourselves to Germans or French, but we need to focus on the investment project of strategic importance. So let us look at electromobility, at electric chargers. A company that built the Polish electromobility scene. Now we're having this huge investment project from Intel, and we are shifting to a very different level. So there are very many players who see the potential on investing in this part of Europe. Well, these are Koreans, the Chinese, the Americans. Well, the Chinese, they love investing into energy storage, energy warehouses. And then once this Ukrainian and Russian conflict ends and we are engaged in restoration, rebuilding of Ukraine, and even if we don't, Jasionka and Poland at large will be the transit country. So it's about choosing the right priorities, and we can overcome any difficulties which are here to come. Right, I like your approach. So let us now ask practitioners, Agrofert and farmers' activity. So Agrofert, what opportunities do you see here in this context? Actually, as it is, I'm a Pole and a Czech at the same time. In Poland, we look at statistics. So let's say we have 15,000 of cattle breeders, and they are our clients, and trust me, out of that 15,000 of breeders, I am able to come up with perhaps 100 or 150 farms or locations of these breeders. The rest is fragmented. As you mentioned, they are not connected to the grid. Well, we're like far, far behind. We're lagging behind here in Poland. As a technological company, we're unable to change it. It's about introducing the right legislation. It's about streamlining certain processes, and that's been easy. This is not a very difficult thing to change, but we've been talking about it here at this forum for 5 to 7 years. Right, and it hasn't changed. Nothing has changed. Now it's about pumping gas to the grid. And trust me, no gas pipeline is able to accommodate the gas. And now, look what we have. We need this gas.
Że nie ma możliwości, ale technicznie
You said that there are no capacities, but do you mean like there are no technical capacities, or there are no like there's no goodwill? Goodwill or good faith is one thing. But then let's talk about pumping. Let's take pumping. So in order to pump this gas to the grid, you need to purify this gas. We need to buy membranes that purify this gas. And we need to have these membranes supplied. And last year, it turned out we could put our hands on 2 containers of membranes only. So we want to be the superpower, building bioethanol plants. But these days it takes 8 to 12 months to co-generate. You need to produce it. It's not that the whole market is sitting and back and watching the Polish market to move. We have delivered a biogas plant in South Korea, and same for France. We built a biogas plant of 6 megawatts, and 100 farmers supply substrate to that biogas plant, and that would be a great option for Podlasie region in Poland. If I have 10 farmers here in the room, trust me that after the debate, 9 of them would approach me and ask me to deal with them on a one-to-one basis. So we have this reluctance to operate and work together as a team, as a group. We should have experts, we should have co-ops that should do it together. A farmer should supply the substrate to someone else.
Absolutnie. Znaczy, to, co jest naszym problemem narodowym, to jest
we have a national problem.
dotyczące współpracy. Tak? Nam się bardzo
We
trudno
find
współpracuje.
it difficult to cooperate. It's a vice versa. You have mentioned 100 farmers.
Podpisanie 100
Let's be honest.
przez firmę to jest tak ryzykowne.
Signing 100 contracts is very risky for a company. Then you've got a biogas plant and the farmers will say, we want to change the price. And that translates into other things. I can tell you more later. Co-ops is an option, but you need to educate people. You need to show that they have a skin in the game.
Ja może tylko podam jedną istotną rzecz. Czas realizacji inwestycji. Proszę pamiętać o czymś takim.
Lead time, or the implementation time, if you will. We have 5 investments in Poland. You will see biogas plants in 3 to 4 years' time at the earliest. It's a certain series of events. First, you need to adapt the farm for the plant to be built there.
Wszystkiego, co na gospodarstwie śmierdzi, na biogazownię. Oprócz tego powinniśmy zapomnieć o jednej bardzo istotnej rzeczy. Biogazownia to jest kiszonka. Biogazownia to jest odpad.
It is not what you get. It's not a silage. It's waste. Only that type of plant can change things. We try to combat that, but we are technology companies. We can do certain things, others not. We can give you insights and tips. And farmers should sit down with companies like ours and to develop a plan to realize what they want. And the agency, well, I could like it more. But maybe you could disagree about something. There is no reason to disagree.
Chodzi mi mianowicie o kwestię zrzeszania się, a naprawdę
coming together, building associations. It's easier to build regulations for groups of business people.
Będzie można podpinać przedsiębiorstwa,
Cable pulling is an option.
będą powstawać do już istniejących struktur
You will be able
OZE, tylko że muszą być chętni
link link
którzy będą chcieli ryzyko
groups
dzielić.
to
Ten sam
the
problem
existing
mamy jako
infrastructure.
agencja z
Risk sharing is
eksporterami, proszę
important.
państwa. To jest
Similarly,
bardzo
we have an
tożsamy
issue
problem.
with
My moglibyśmy
exporters.
znacznie skuteczniej
This is a
na rynkach
similar problem.
zagranicznych konkurować,
We could
gdybyśmy się
be
zebrali w
stronger
grupy w
players
konsorcjach
abroad,
Nie robimy
but
tego w
first
ogóle,
we need to
próbowaliśmy od
build
5 lat
groups,
to robić.
consortia.
Więc,
We've tried that.
trzeba
We
działać więcej
haven't
razem.
succeeded.
Razem, ale
We need
przede
to
wszystkim
work
stworzyć przepisy,
together
które
more.
promują
We need
działanie razem,
regulations
które
that
uzależniają od tego finansowania,
promote
dla takich grup. I to jest,
team
one
effort.
mają same, że tak powiem, plusy. Dzielą ryzyko
You
i
see only
jednocześnie
upsides
budują
there. You
jakąś
share
taką,
risks,
społeczną chęć
one,
do współpracy.
and two,
Mamy kolejną
you have this
rekomendację,
will
a
to
teraz pan
cooperate.
Krzysztof Dzieduszczyński, praktyk
Krzysztof
OZE, który nam opowie
Dzieduszczyński,
o swoim spojrzeniu
a practitioner
na
in
ten
the
temat.
area of renewables, who present your
Proszę
perspective. So there will be a dispute after all.
Wróćmy
Go ahead.
polskiego rolnika do
Polish
polskiego
farmers.
rolnictwa, bo żeśmy
Polish
trafili do
farming.
Ameryki, do Korei.
You've mentioned Korea and the US. Let's go back to Poland.
Mamy jeden problem.
There is this
Możemy
one
mówić o technologiach,
issue.
o
Yes, you could discuss
spółdzielniach,
technologies and
ale jak nie będziemy mogli
cooperatives,
wyprowadzić mocy do sieci,
but first
możemy
you
sobie
need
gadać
power
tutaj kolejne 5,
in the
10
grid. You need to be
Pierwsza
able to
rzecz
connect.
I najważniejsza, uwolnić moce przyłączniowe.
And
Czyli
you need to be able
doinwestować
to connect
dystrybucję, przesył,
distribution,
żeby,
transmission,
najważniejszy priorytet.
capacity
Mamy
needs to be
technologię.
invested in. This is
Oczywiście,
the
mamy
priority.
regulacje, oczywiście.
Yes,
Cable
regulations
pooling,
necessary, cable
który
pooling,
może
all fine and
dać
very
nam
well.
drugie tyle źródeł wytwórczych.
You could
Czy mamy
get
wystarczającą ilość fotowoltaiki? Nie.
100%
3 razy
as much.
To jest dopiero ten poziom.
Sources, no.
Oczywiście w
Twice as
piku,
much photovoltaics
będą
is even not enough. You need at least 3 times. And
odstawienia.
yes,
Tego najlepszym przykładem
if it comes to peak generation, there will be problems. I've got 82 megawatts and sometimes they disconnect me and I cannot supply, I cannot deliver. Did you get compensation? Yes. 25% is the power surplus that I
To nie
have.
wychodzi do sieci.
When you've got peak, it doesn't go to the grid. But we are working on hydrogen technologies. What we want is to store that surplus in hydrogen storage systems. Secondly, soon virtual prosumer regulations will kick in. For farmers, it might be great business, but remember, you need to be able to connect. You need to be able to connect to the grid and transmit what you've generated. Also, hundreds, thousands of megawatts, but it's all dead. Mr. President, last year extended the existing contracts for a reason. Here, in this region, 40 megawatts was blocked. Decisions were taken in 2007 or so the permits were granted, but those plants will never be built because turbines cannot be delivered there. So a wind farm will never be built there, and it's 40 megawatts that could be already in use. At this point, we in Poland produce 1/3 of what we need, I mean renewables. Imagine
rolnicy są największym beneficjentem, bo to na terenach rolniczych mamy
the following
farmy
scenario.
wiatrowe, farmy
You
fotowoltaiczne,
have to remember that biogas plants
rozwijają się z
and
różnych
renewable
powodów, ale teraz
plants,
głównym powodem to
photovoltaic
jest
plants,
moce
you have
przyłączeniowe.
them in the countryside. But the thing is, the main issue is to connect, to be able to connect. If you triple your capacity to connect and transmit, the situation will be great because we will be self-reliant. But then the grid operator will say that it destabilizes the system and they cannot take in all this power. Right, but I've mentioned hydrogen for a reason. It is one of the pieces of the puzzle that give you stability. You also have energy storage systems. Look at the number of large-scale storage systems decisions that have been issued.
Z kapitałem chińskim oczywiście
There are
powodowali, i śmiem twierdzić, że
Chinese capital companies
manipulacji
that win.
cenami energii na giełdzie.
And
Jeśli
we
jeden
may
inwestor ma
witness
1,5 giga,
energy prices being manipulated. You can have one giga and you can manipulate the prices. It is the farmers and SMEs that should actually play an important role. Mind you, the quality of the grid is very poor. Those small players may stabilize their situation, improve the quality of the grid. This is the way to go. What have we seen since 2015 in Poland? That is, this act on renewables, it's worse than scandalous. This act was tragic. How many amendments were there? There were amendments to amendments to amendments. This is what we saw. So we need to straighten it.
Przy ustawie domrożenia cen, tylko wypracować
We should not play around. We need to cooperate with practitioners that have got up to 20 years of experience in the renewable sources. They speak to business and other players on how to make the sector better. A very important recommendation, or rather recommendations. Ryszard Pawlik.
Tak, znaczy trochę w nawiązaniu, bo rozmawialiśmy o biometanie i o tym, że od 5 czy od 6 lat o tym rozmawiamy.
We've talked about it for 5 or 6 years now.
Parę tygodni temu rząd przekazał do Brukseli draft, co prawda,
presented to Brussels a draft of a document that's supposed to be ready in a few months' time. It's an update of our plan for energy and climate 2030. Drafted very quickly. It should have been delivered earlier. The previous government wasn't really interested in that. The Commission took umbrage and, a document had to be tabled. Two issues here. Biomethane.
Rozmawialiśmy przed chwilą o prognozach 7-8 miliardów metrów sześciennych. Komisja Europejska mówi, że do 30 roku Polska ma potencjał 3,5 miliarda. Branża mówi,
3 to 3.5 says the Commission, the industry says 2. That's the capacity, but in the draft we get 0.5 as a forecast. Today we see 0.5. So maybe in half a decade we will see why we had just half a decade 0.5. Who is to be blamed?
A druga rzecz z tego planu energetyka. Dokładnie, już nie chciałem tego, tak, ale dokładnie.
Yes, you're right, sir.
Tak, dokładnie tak. Natomiast druga rzecz to są prosumenci, gdzie też się zastanawiam tak naprawdę, bo była podawana ta liczba tam 1 400 000 prosumentów,
1,4 prosumers.
przyrosło między 2019 a 2020
1 million was what we got in the years 2019-2022.
I znowu
Professor, you agree? Am I correct? Yes.
KPI-ku mówi o 2 milionach w 2030
roku.
roku.
And now we are talking about 2 million in 2030.
Wydaje mi się, że to jest dość mocno niedoszacowane.
I believe
nie wiem o ile,
that this number is
chodzi tylko o to, że wiadomo, że samym zapisywaniem czegoś na papierze niczego nie zrobimy.
Natomiast jeżeli because you have put something on paper is not enough. And yet, ambitions are important and targets are important because they make you more ambitious. Professor, I understand that you could also give us the case study.
Proszę Państwa, zajmuję się polityką publiczną, polityką energetyczno-klimatyczną.
Dealing with public policy, climate policy, energy policy. You see, people think that you are successful because you've exceeded the goal, even if it is a very low number.
Ten plan to jest tylko scenariusz, że tak powiem, bazowy.
So what we see in this plan, this is just something to begin with. In the plan, what we need is a bigger number for biogas. Our grids should be ready to blend up to 10% of biogas. The question, is it going to happen? Because if we had that, you could pump gas into the grid. Issues. I think that the society plays an important role here. So we need to talk to the society
żeby w jakiś sposób zaplanować na poziomie lokalnym właśnie biogazownię. Inwestorzy muszą, to musi być dialog. To nie może być tak jak w przypadku energetyki wiatrowej,
because we shouldn't follow the path of the wind farms, because basically things were included last minute. So the biogas sector must not do that. If you do that, you're just going to fall flat on your face. You need energy co-ops, local and regional authorities also need to be active. They need to set up cooperatives for themselves and help others to set them up. Local authorities need to draft development strategies. Look what's there. I looked at the old ones. I reviewed 20 and I was fed up. They are basically all the same. They're all basically copy-paste, 70-75%. Supply plans for heat and energy. You need those. It's a must. The question is, what about utility companies, energy companies, how they are going to use those plans? Companies are supposed to be included in the process. It is not vacuum that you work in. You need dialogue. Ultimately, you need to be able to attract a company, but soon this company will need a zero-emission source. If it's not there, they will drop out of the supply chain. Mr. Dzieduszyński, would you like to add something?
I work with a great municipality in the center of Poland. The name of the municipality is Uniejów. And actually, surprising, they do exactly what the professor has described. So they have their own sources of heating, their own photovoltaic farm, their cogenerator and heat pumps, residents and solar panels on the roofs. They have organized all that, and they're a great example of we can do it at the municipal level. So it's feasible, but you need a good success story to prove it. With that, municipalities will be just presenting that because, well, that's a great way to go about it. And I agree that we should look at PVs and the wind turbines and biogas plants. So let's put them together into one bag and let's start by demonstrating what we can do right here in Poland. We need some time for that. We need several months to do that, but we need a partner that is going to listen to us. Do not forget that we have farmers. Farmers should do all these things and arrange for renewable energy sources, and the farmer needs technological partners who know the methodology and can release farmers from the burden of doing all these extra activities. Right, we have some questions from the floor, so let's hear very briefly from our panelists. I can see that there are 3 questions, but we must be disciplined. So, straight to the point, I wanted to advertise our agency, the Agency for Investment and Trade. You mentioned that membrane procurement difficulty. So perhaps you could use our services, like in April we have this trade mission to the Hydrogen Convention, and this is where you can talk to the leaders of certain technologies. In principle, we support the expansion of Polish enterprises, but if there are any critical resources which are hard to come by on the Polish market, then we can simply take you to the core producers to the producer producing the
Zostaje pan po
original
panelu,
product.
prawda? Tutaj można do wizytówkę podać.
And I'll be here, I'll be around today, so please approach me. We offer our assistance free of charge. So
Dziękujemy
feel
za te
free to
rekomendacje.
use
Głos
our
Brukseli.
services.
Ja chciałem tylko jeszcze jedną
Thank
rzecz
you
powiedzieć,
for the
bo rozmawialiśmy
recommendation.
o biometanowniach, o spółdzielniach. Chciałem jeszcze, żeby jedna rzecz wybrzmiała, agrowoltaika.
Well, let me mention one more aspect, which is
Fundacji 2-3
agrivoltaics.
lata temu to był bardzo gorąco debatowany temat.
That
czyli to
topic
wspólne
was
połączenie produkcji
debated in a heated debate a few years ago.
Wykluczające działalności
So
rolniczej.
that
Tutaj znowu to się
allows
dzieje
for
w Niemczech,
farming
we Francji, we
activity.
Włoszech.
So, and we have it in Germany, in France, in Italy. There are some reports of the Testing and Research Center. And the report comments on the huge potential of Poland, Spain, etc. But then there are different approaches to the farming land and to non-farming land. It's difficult to solve the problem of this land classification and eligibility for the PV purposes. But we are working on achieving our goal for PVs by 2030.
Tak, bardzo krótko.
And from the professor, sir.
Jeżeli patrzymy na biogazownię,
Very briefly,
biznesowego,
if we look at biogas plants from the business point of view,
w tym modelu, który myśmy
we have a model,
pracowali sobie
and its most sensitive element that we developed in the Warsaw Business College is the matter of substrate.
Cena substratów wzrośnie wam o 10%,
If the price of the substrate goes up by 10%, then MBV goes down by 15%. And that's the key.
Jeżeli mamy rozwijać biogazownię, oprócz tej całej litanii, że tak powiem,
So we have the whole list of issues, claims, demands, etc. But we want to develop our network of biogas plants. So now we have this question about the potential actions that should the government take. We have this competition from the natural gas. Natural gas is not prohibited. And so far, it is admitted as a resource here, and we need to end with that. Well, in March 2022, we had assumptions for amending the energy policy, and biogas was mentioned only once in these assumptions. Ladies and gentlemen, we have at least 4 questions. You can raise your hands. 5 questions. We can do it, but we'll take very quick questions and very short answers. Please introduce yourself and just offer a brief comment.
Jan Bocian, ja myślę, że brakuje przede wszystkim pierwszego podstawowego
Well, I think that one basic thing that we need is to answer this question why. Because, in my opinion, we are overlooking that demand for energy in food processing. These sources of energy should be located at the food processing sites. Let's stop subsidizing Chinese producers of PV panels. Let's decide about the products that we want to produce in our country. We need to have an industrial product that is going to have a long-term fiscal effect in this country. The money borrowed from our children and grandchildren is spent on subsidizing foreign competitors. Otherwise, we will not increase the competition of our farming sector. I come from the experimental plant of the zootechnical department. Since 2015, we've been exploiting a biogas plant of 2 megawatts, and I'm a big proponent of biogas plants that should be set up at farms. Well, in particular, farms with animal production should have that developed. And in my opinion, that is also an alternative source of income. For that reason, we set up and started the biogas plant project. So we have this animal production, plant production, crop growing, and biogas plant. The professor has mentioned substrates. And he mentioned farming waste. It is not easy to get such farming waste. Let's say that if we have a big farm, let's say that we have a big farm without animal production, and several thousand of tons of crops, all that plant waste, crop waste can be processed. And then the difficulty is that we have these volatile and rapidly changing energy prices and the red tape. So every year we get another institution that comes to control us. Thank you.
A zatem głos z panelu.
Right.
Szanowni panowie, technologie, jakie powinniśmy
So our panelists mentioned so our speakers mentioned technologies, etc., and waste processing. So if I may answer your first question. When farmers see and measure their benefits from generating their own energy and having the rate of return at the right level, if they use that energy storage system, well, that's one thing, but can we replace technologies? I don't think so. With PVs, we'll never going to be competitive here. Together with Mr. Podhański, we did the first prosumer in Poland 10 years ago. And indeed, well, the price works miracles. Unfortunately, there is no microphone to the speaker.
Ile kosztuje megawattogodzina energii z panelu fotowoltaicznego przy bilansowaniu dla jednego?
So we are talking about the energy and balancing the cost.
Wyprodukowanie jednej megawattogodziny liczyliśmy to około 250 zł.
I się panowie nie zgodzą, nie możemy wejść głębiej w kuluarach, proszę kontynuować.
I ja może kwestia szybciutko, wróćmy do biogazowni.
So let us go back to this biogas plant. So yesterday I was listening to you, to the minister, and now we have drought in Poland. Are you aware that we can try some post-fermentation fraction from this biogas plant? And this is what we do here in Poland. We can purify some residue and return it to the rainwater discharge.
No niestety pana zmartwi, odeślę pana do raportu SGH, gdzie myśmy
Now, there is a report that describes the so-called low emissions technology in this part of Europe. You will learn about the technologies that we have, how far behind we are, even if you look at the Danes. So there is this value chain, and the biogas operates differently there. It's a business model that could be used. Red tape? I agree with you. PVC panels. Net Zero Industry Act has been mentioned. There is an objective there to have renewables bidding. Price would be one factor, and non-price factor is also included. We will see how it works. I understand how you think. And yet, there is this trap we could fall into. People say photovoltaics is Chinese-made, but the alternative is Russian gas and Russian coal, right?
tylko troszeczkę wspierając tutaj pana Ryszarda, no bo
yes, I agree with Ryszard.
Widzę, że wpadamy w taką pułapkę, że my
There
wszystko
is
sami
this
wyprodukujemy.
trap we fall into. We believe that we can produce everything by ourselves. Not possible in this globalized world.
Panelów fotowoltaicznych, które są sprowadzane
PVC imported from China cannot be beaten price. Energy storage systems are also imported en masse. Let's focus on smart specializations in the value chain and let us be best at what we do. Lithium-ion batteries, we are doing increasingly better there.
Były pytania, tutaj pan na końcu.
We've had questions.
Tu pan za chwilkę, to zbierzemy tę drugą turę, więcej nie zdążymy niestety, ale w kuluarach na pewno dyskusja będzie cały
We'll have
czas
just one more
możliwa. Prosimy o
round,
przedstawienie
but
się
you can talk later. Adam Stańczyk.
Chciałbym poruszyć
From
dwie albo trzy rzeczy.
regional
Pierwsza to jest
authorities
kwestia planowania
planning,
przestrzennego. Uważam, że zdecydowanie
spatial
jest
planning.
to
There's one thing
niedoszacowana
I would
rola
like to talk
planowania
about that.
przy rozwoju
It
OZE.
is
Po pierwsze, należałoby
underestimated when it comes to renewables development. You need to have mandatory zones where local authorities would be forced to invest in energy storage to store this energy, for example, from farmers that generate it. Secondly, bans. High-class soils are not renewable. You should never develop photovoltaics there. Also, I do not agree with what's been said. We should never develop ourselves, buy from others. I never said that, was the comment of the panelist. We need to have high aspirations to develop a biogas plant that would be adapted to our farms, the substrates that we have, and the size of our farms. Maybe it could be developed centrally. It would be a device that would be licensed, and a few dozen companies would get the license and let them produce it en masse.
Sama kwestia energetyki wiatrowej też się kompletnie
Wind
nie
energy.
zgodzę z faktem, że beneficjentem elektrowni wiatrowej ostatecznie jest rolnik.
I disagree that the farmer is the ultimate beneficiary of that solution. No, the owner of the farm is the beneficiary, and they often make money at the expense of the Polish landscape, and it's quite often not adapted to the Polish needs. Maybe we should have our own model. It would be 60 to 70 meters big, lower capacity, but it would be deployable better in Poland. Those higher capacity systems do not fit our conditions. It would be better to have somewhat smaller systems that would better fit the Polish conditions.
Nie mówię, żeby nie produkować w Polsce.
I've never said that we should produce in Poland.
Tylko w niektórych przypadkach
I want things to be produced in Poland, but in some cases it is not profitable at all, because certain technologies are being developed in parallel, and the investment in R&D there is so high that you cannot win in this race. It's better to concentrate on the areas where we are really good and grow there.
Chociażby kwestia fundowania projektów przez NCBIR, które trwają tyle lat, ten proces trwa, że zanim się skończy jeden projekt, to już rynek 2 razy albo 3 razy wyprzedzi ten projekt.
And they take so long that once the project is complete, the market has already
padła kwestia przeze mnie membran i
developed something far superior.
Membrany jak najbardziej możemy składać w Polsce. Na świecie jest tylko 2 producentów, jeden w Japonii, drugi w Stanach. Nie jesteśmy w stanie jako kraj, czy
as a
nawet jako
country,
Europa,
even as Europe, we cannot compete with them. There was a good example given. Those renewable sources.
Ja o tym mówię. Plan zagospodarowania przestrzennego wydyskutowane. Tu mogą
spatial planning
tu może być
is a solution. Here you can have a biogas plant. Here you've got wind generation. People agree, and there you are, Bobzionko.
Ekonomia jest taka.
Wind energy systems bigger and smaller.
niższych cen w tym, że
We want to have lower prices.
to większe instalacje.
And you get lower prices when you have a bigger installation. I'm not going to delve into details.
Gdzie już te wielkości nie mają takiego znaczenia.
Proszę Państwa, 5 minut, jedna odpowiedź, jedno pytanie.
5 minutes.
Ostatnie do Kujawsko-Pomorskiego. Tam jest dużo wiatraków.
In Kujawsko-Pomorskim
Skończyć trzeba z patologią, która była przez 15 lat przy lokalizowaniu wiatraków. Więc trzeba wyznaczać w gminach miejsca pod inwestycje o odnawialnych źródłach energii, czy to fotowoltaika, czy wiatraki. Ja jako klimatolog nie zgodzę się jednak z tym, że mniejsze wiatraki są dostosowane do warunków polskich.
So I'm not saying that smaller solutions are better for Poland. No, higher towers are better. They give you economies of scale. I'm a farmer.
Ja 9 lat temu był taki program rządowy dofinansowania małych biogazowni.
There was this government program to finance small biogas plants. I'm interested. I prepared the land.
Tak samo jest jako polsko-czeki. Firmę, kolegę w Czechach, który miał firmę tam biogaz, która
I had this friend from Czechia. He was in this
skończył na tym, że agencja wycofała dofinansowania.
The agency withdrew funding.
No biogazownia tam stał pół roku, gdzieś tam kolega sprzedał gdzieś tam komuś innemu.
The thing is, sold so small biogas plants.
Ale nawet myśmy nie potrzebowali do sieci to zapisać, bo uważali, jak nie wie, do sieci przejdziemy tak sobie jakieś suszarnie zrobimy, ziołowi, energię spożyjemy, wszystko na własne potrzeby gospodarcze.
And we wanted to develop things for our own needs.
Nie mówmy o takich dużych, na razie takie
Let's not talk about big ones. Let's talk about something that can be developed or built by small farmers. What's your question, sir?
Z tymi małymi biogazowniami.
What about those small biogas plants?
To może szybko odpowiem i zrobię małą reklamę. Zapraszam do współpracy. Mamy do 50 kW, są, działają, chętnie pokażemy, mamy takie biogazownie działające.
We can display them, we can show
od pana profesora, ale jedno.
Powiem tak, bardzo mi przykro z tego powodu, że nie dostał pan dofinansowania
I'm sorry to hear that you didn't get funding for your
przykładów
project.
jak pan powinno być jak najmniej.
There should be as few examples
z punktu
as
widzenia
yours as
finansowego
possible.
duże biogazownie bardziej się opłacają.
Because yes, large biogas plants
jak pana lokalne
are more financially viable,
przedmiotem umowy społecznej.
the big ones. But you should also get the ones like the one that you wanted to develop.
I to trzeba po prostu ustalić.
And the smaller ones also exist in the market. They will constitute
Tym bardziej, że przykład mamy za zachodnią granicą. W Niemczech funkcjonuje 10 000 małych biogazowni, 200 wielkich biometanowni. I na to funkcjonuje, czyli wystarczy zrobić benchmark, tak? No,
it works. You can have benchmarks.
Szanowni Państwo, moglibyśmy długo debatować, przenosimy debatę w kuluary. Wielkie brawa dla naszych panelistów. I dla Państwa za udział dziękuję bardzo. Krótka przerwa, jeszcze można złapać pana ministra, bo jest za drzwiami.
You can catch the minister. He is just outside this room.